Chapter 366. Your lordship wants to know who he is too, Long Fei Yi replied to Han Yunqing's question. He trusted that Chu Shifeng and Tang Li wouldn't be stupid enough to reveal the secret of the prisoner. Leaving aside the secret, Long Fei Yi told Han Yunqing everything he knew about the black-robed assassin. Impossible. That's far beyond the limits of human physiology. Han Yunqing said, then changed her mind. Your Highness, perhaps it's not impossible for such a person to exist. Isn't Bailey Mingxiang an impossible existence? Bailey Mingxiang's constitution also defied the natural laws of the human body. There were too many unexplainable mysteries in Cloud Realm continent. Then what kind of constitution is it? Long Fei Yi asked. Without a doubt, Han Yunqing had no idea. Your Highness, why did that assassin want to kill you? Was it your enemy? Your lordship wants to know too. Since he came once, there'll be a second time. Long Fei Yi was very curious about the black-robed assassin's constitution. Of course, he was even more curious about how the assassin knew about the person locked up in the hidden pavilion. As long as that person was still locked up, he wasn't afraid that the assassin wouldn't come. It looks like we'll have to strengthen our defenses, Han Yunqing was very serious. She knew nothing of the truth. Long Fei Yi didn't speak, but his hand gently stroked her back. This action drew Han Yunqing's attention back to the two of them. Her face was pressed against his chest, so she couldn't see his expression. She imagined that Long Fei Yi would be quiet and gentle as he stroked her back. She really wanted him to hold her a little longer so she could enjoy the warmth of this moment. But reality proved that she was a calm and rational person. She knew that now wasn't the time to be love-struck. Your Highness, if you don't let me go, I reckon you'll have to lie in bed for another month. Han Yunqing said seriously. The wound on Long Fei Yi's chest was painful. He knew very well that if his injury worsened, a lot of things would be delayed. However, when he saw Han Yunqing's red eyes, he couldn't control himself and didn't want to let go of her. Seeing that Long Fei Yi did not respond, Han Yunqing became serious. Your Highness, please let go of me immediately. Long Fei's thoughts didn't wander, but he immediately let go. A hint of helplessness appeared on his lips. This woman also had times when she was serious and fierce towards him. Han Yunqing carefully got up from Long Fei Yi's body, and then immediately checked his wound. After making sure that it hadn't split open, she was relieved. Your Highness, should we let Imperial Physician Gu in for a follow-up examination? She still obediently asked for Long Fei Yi's opinion. Long Fei Yi only nodded without a word. Currently, Tang Li and the rest were waiting anxiously by the door. When they saw Han Yunqing suddenly open the door, they all jumped in fright. Esteemed Wang Fei, how is His Highness? Chu Shifeng was in the middle of asking when Tang Li rushed inside. He's awake. Imperial Physician Gu, hurry inside and take a look. As soon as Han Yunqing finished speaking, Chu Shifeng rushed inside as well. Gu Beiyue immediately noticed Han Yunqing's red eyes. This woman had been crying. A flash of heartache flitted past his clear eyes, but was quickly replaced by joy. He hurried inside with Han Yunqing. As soon as he saw Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue was neither servile nor overbearing, but respectful and courteous. He took Long Fei Yi's pulse as he asked a few questions. Soon enough, he smiled faintly and said, Your Highness Duke of Qin is blessed by the heavens. His life is no longer in danger. To Long Fei Yi, this was nonsense. He didn't need Gu Beiyue to take his pulse to know the answer. But Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. Gu Beiyue carefully examined Long Fei Yi's wound. Your Highness, the wound has only just begun to heal. The wound is very deep and serious. I ask that Your Highness rest for a month. By no means can you use your right hand, especially a sword. A month without a sword. Chu Shifeng and Tang Li exchanged glances, both starting to worry for Long Fei Yi's sake. For a swordsman, not being able to use a sword for a month was definitely a very troublesome matter. What if he ran into another assassin? Long Fei Yi remained expressionless as he waited for Gu Beiyue to continue. Gu Beiyue didn't say much, but wrote a prescription for Han Yunqing. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness will have to use this prescription for a month. For the first half of the month, change the dressing every day. For the second half, change it every 2 or 3 days. It depends on the situation. Han Yunqing was very serious. She didn't take the prescription directly, but carefully read it over before accepting it. Long Fei Yi saw all of this. He didn't dare to use Gu Beiyue's prescription, but Han Yunqing's was enough to set his mind at ease. As Gu Beiyue was packing up his medicine chest and preparing to leave, Long Fei Yi spoke up cold. This prince was so seriously injured that my life was hanging by a thread, but Imperial Physician Gu was still able to save me. It's no wonder he's the head Imperial Physician of the Imperial Physician Courtyard. These words were not only praising Gu Beiyue's medical skills, but they were also questioning his abilities. Even Long Fei Yi himself thought that he wouldn't be able to save him. Your Highness, it's all thanks to esteemed Wang Fei that I was able to stop the bleeding in time. If not for esteemed Wang Fei's assistance, this official wouldn't have been able to help. Gu Beiyue's words were true. At least in everyone's opinion, the most difficult part of treating Long Fei Ye's injuries was stopping the bleeding. In Han Yunqing's opinion, treating someone was far more difficult than stopping the bleeding. She only took Gu Beiyue's words as modesty. Someone, reward Imperial Physician Gu with 100 taels of gold. Long Fei Yi was very generous. Thank you, Your Highness. Gu Beiyue didn't refuse. Instead, he added, Your Highness Duke of Qin, this 1 month is a critical time for your wounds to heal. By no means should you use excessive force. If you can avoid it, it's best not to. So speaking, he took a step forward and murmured by Long Fei Ye's ear, Your Highness, forgive this official for speaking out of turn, but I ask that Your Highness abstain from sexual intercourse for a month. If Han Yunqing heard these words, it was hard to tell how she'd react. Actually, it was normal for a doctor like Gu Beiyue to instruct him on things like this. If he didn't, it'd be beneath his professional standards. Long Fei Yi was very calm as he replied, Your Lordship will. The hidden meaning of this answer, could it be that? Gu Beiyue stiffened, but quickly recovered. No one noticed anything off about him, but he still smiled warmly and went to pack up his medicine chest. Now that everything was clear, Gu Beiyue had no reason to stay any longer. Chu Shifeng, send Imperial Physician Gu back. With Long Fei Ye's orders, Gu Beiyue had no choice but to leave. Han Yunqing saw him to the door. Gu Beiyue, I really have to thank you this time. Esteemed Wang Fei is too courteous. This one originally thought, His Highness is blessed by the heavens. Gu Beiyue didn't say it out loud, but Han Yunqing understood. According to Gu Beiyue, if Long Fei Yi hadn't woken up that night, there would be no hope for him. That's right, His Highness is blessed by the heavens. Han Yunqing mused. Long Fei Yi was really lucky. She had no idea that Gu Beiyue had long predicted that Long Fei Yi would wake up, but had lied in order to hide his medical skills. Gu Beiyue had calculated that Long Fei Yi wouldn't wake up until a month later. But he never expected Long Fei Yi to wake up so early, and so many days earlier at that. It had to be said that Long Fei Ye's body was terrifyingly strong. While Han Yunqing was sending Gu Beiyue away, Long Fei Yi had long asked Tang Li about everything. Big bro, this Gu Beiyue shouldn't be an enemy. Tang Li might be impulsive, but he wasn't stupid. As he saw it, Gu Beiyue wasn't a simple man, but he didn't harbor any enmity towards them. Even if he's not an enemy, he might not be a friend. Long Fei Yi had his own considerations. Han Yunqing immediately returned after sending Gu Beiyue away, so Tang Li didn't say much. Your Highness, no matter what, you have to rest for a month. Han Yunqing was very serious. She knew that Long Feiyi had a lot of important matters on hand, but nothing was more important than his health. She widened her eyes, making her teary eyes look even more swollen. "You're crying," Tang Li blurted out. Only then did he notice Han Yunqing's eyes. Han Yunqing immediately retreated. After calming down, she felt that crying was very embarrassing. She pretended not to hear Tang Li's words and continued, "Your Highness, why don't you recuperate in the U Pavilion? It's quiet here." Before Long Feiyi could answer, Tang Li spoke again. He even deliberately went around to Han Yunqing's side to take a look. "You're really crying." As far as Tang Li knew, Han Yunqing was a tough woman with a poisonous heart and venomous hands. It was impossible for her to cry. Han Yunqing was very annoyed by him and pushed him away in annoyance. "So what if I'm crying? Didn't you go crazy and want to hit someone before?" This guy actually wanted to hit Gu Beiyue. How abominable. "That's because I'm worried about your highness. I'm worried because I'm worried, understand?" Tang Li had never been stingy in expressing his love for his dearest cousin. "Can't I be worried because I'm worried?" Han Yunqing casually retorted in front of Long Feiyi. Tang Li was very surprised. He had only left for a short while, and this woman, Han Yunqing, actually dared to say such things in front of Long Feiyi? He glanced at Long Feiyi and saw that the corners of Long Feiyi's mouth were slightly curved, but he did not say anything. Why did he have the feeling that these two guys were showing off their affection? Although he knew that this woman had a place in Long Feiyi's heart, judging from the current situation, wouldn't it progress too quickly? "Yes. Of course you can." Tang Li smiled and said meaningfully, "You're his woman. If you're not worried, who's going to be worried?" As he spoke, he left with a chuckle, leaving Han Yunqing and Long Feiyi alone. When Tang Li was around, Han Yunqing spoke calmly. However, once Tang Li left, the room became quiet, and Han Yunqing felt a little awkward. She sneaked a glance at Long Feiyi and saw that Long Feiyi was staring at her with interest. She decided to stay calm and let Long Feiyi look at her without saying a word. However, reality proved that her self-control was far inferior to Long Feiyi's. Not long after, she could not take it anymore. "Your Highness, rest first. I'll go prepare the herbs. I'll have to change your medicine later." Han Yunqing wanted to escape as she spoke, but Long Feiyi waved his hand. "Come here." Seeing this, Han Yunqing panicked. "Your Highness, you can't act recklessly." Chapter 367. When she saw Long Feiyi wave at her, Han Yunqing rushed over and carefully took his hand before setting it down. Her quiet face was filled with seriousness. "Your Highness, you're not allowed to move around for a month. Qinxie will keep an eye on you." "It's inconvenient," Long Feiyi said mildly. Although he was born into the imperial clan, he disliked being waited on and did many things himself. Moreover, he was used to practicing his swordsmanship early in the morning, then brewing tea and meditating afterwards. How could he stand not moving for a month? Han Yunqing didn't even think before she said, "Qinxie will wait on you whatever your highness wants to do." Long Feiyi arched a brow at her, the interest in his eyes growing stronger. All right, Han Yunqing finally realized how complicated things were. If she wanted to wait on someone who couldn't use his hands, then she'd have to do a lot of things, including very private things. There really were many inconveniences. After a while, she added, "Have Chu Shifeng and Tang Li help." Seeing Han Yunqing's helpless, disappointed, and embarrassed expression, Long Feiyi didn't say a word. Instead, he reached out again and tilted her chin up. "Han Yunqing, you just have to help your lordship change his dressing." As expected, this woman didn't understand him well enough. He was obsessed with cleanliness and never liked other people touching him. It wasn't just women, but men as well. If he said he wouldn't die, then nothing would happen to him. His overbearingness, his mischievousness, and his gentleness were all her most fatal weaknesses. Han Yunqing immediately quieted down and tilted her chin up. According to Tang Li's words, she was clearly a fierce tigress, but now she was like a docile little lamb. Everything had its vanquisher. Just who had vanquished whom? Long Fei Yi said mildly, 1 month is too long. Tianhui would never give your lordship a month. But he'd hardly finished speaking when the guard by the door reported, Your Highness, there's a situation in the city. Speak, Long Fei Yi said. This morning, His Majesty officially gave you the title of Imperial Envoy for Disaster Relief. He requested that you set out to the disaster area today to save the victims from the fire and water. The Imperial Edict is already on the way and will be delivered to your residence soon. The secret guard replied truthfully. Damned Emperor Tianhui. If it wasn't for this accident, they would have been on their way long ago and wouldn't have needed to rush him. It had only been a few days, but Emperor Tianhui had already lost his cool and issued an imperial edict. He even ordered them to set out on the same day. Han Yunqing cursed in her heart. She swore to herself that she'd find a chance to prank Emperor Tianhui and let him have a taste of what it felt like to attend court with serious injuries. Get ready. We're going back to the residence. Long Fei Yi had no intention of resting. As he spoke, he clutched his chest and was about to get off the bed. Han Yunqing's heart ached. She hurriedly stopped him. Your Highness, please wait a little longer. If you need to pack anything, just let me know. Long Fei Yi was planning to check on that person in the secret room, but he hesitated before lying back down. There's nothing to pack. Help me change my clothes. This room was Long Fei Yi's sleeping quarters at the hidden pavilion. There wasn't a single servant girl inside. Everything inside was very simple, a bed, a chair, and a cupboard. Han Yunqing found a set of loose, black robes. Loose robes wouldn't bind the wound, but black robes would prevent blood from seeping out. Long Fei Yi didn't say much, but Han Yunqing understood. They'd have to hide the wound when they received the edict. News of his injuries couldn't be leaked, or else they'd never make it to the disaster areas. When Han Yunqing brought the robes over, she discovered that Long Fei Yi's undergarments were stained with blood. They'd have to change out of them as well. She could only go find clean undergarments, but by the time she returned, Long Fei Yi was undressing himself. Your Highness, let me do it. She was anxious and rushed over to hold his hand down again. Don't move. This time, Long Fei Yi was well behaved and didn't move. Han Yunqing's movements were very careful. She pulled open the belt, unbuttoned the collar, and then carefully took off the pure white undergarments from Long Fei Yi's back. Once the undergarments were taken off, Long Fei Yi's well-toned back was completely revealed. His bronze skin and almost perfect back lines made one's imagination run wild. Han Yunqing was sitting right behind him. She was very close, and everything was within reach. Although she deliberately avoided it, she couldn't help but take a few more glances. However, it was just a few glances that made her want to get closer, closer, and even closer. You don't? Long Fei Yi suddenly asked faintly. Han Yunqing was startled. She clearly hadn't done anything, but it seemed like she'd done something bad. Her face immediately turned red. You don't? Long Fei Yi asked again. What? It was as if Long Fei Yi knew what she was thinking. Han Yunqing panicked. Change clothes. Long Fei Yi's patience had really improved a lot. Han Yunqing finally understood and hurriedly took out clean undergarments. However, she quickly discovered that she didn't know how to. Because of her profession, Han Yunqing had helped many people undress in her life. However, this was the first time she'd helped someone put on clothes. She held the undergarments on Long Fei Yi's back. After helping him put them on, she didn't know what to do. In the end, Han Yunqing learned that it was easy to undress. You didn't have to raise your hand. But putting on clothes wasn't so easy. Raising one's hand was necessary. Just as she was about to tell Long Fei Yi to raise his hand slightly, Long Fei raised his hands first. Both of his hands were raised in a horizontal line, the standard way to put on clothes. Han Yunqing was so ashamed that she almost buried her head in the covers. Only then did she help him put on his clothes. After tying his belt, Long Fei was quite satisfied. He said mildly, "You'll have to serve me in the future." Han Yunqing didn't know what to say. This was the first time she realized that this guy was so bad. By the time Han Yunqing and Long Fei returned to the Duke of Qin's estate in a carriage, Emperor Tianhui's new favorite, Eunuch Chen, was already waiting for them. Thanks to Eunuch Shui's previous lesson, Eunuch Chen was well-behaved and didn't dare to act presumptuously. When he saw Long Fei and Han Yunqing return, he quickly read out the imperial edict before leaving. As the guard had reported, the imperial edict conferred Long Fei the title of imperial envoy for disaster relief. He was to rush to the disaster areas as soon as he received the edict. Although that was what the imperial edict said, Long Fei still had an excuse to delay things for a few days. But he couldn't afford to delay things at a time like this, because this matter had already been pushed to the heart of the storm. News of his trip to the disaster areas would probably spread throughout Tianning by tomorrow. If he delayed things for a few days, it'd give Emperor Tianhui a chance to smear his name. Public opinion could always be swayed. To put it nicely, it was a guide. To put it bluntly, it was control. On the way back from the hidden pavilion, he had already gotten a clear idea of the current state of public opinion. The celebration of the Crown Prince's wedding had been drowned out by discussions about the charity bazaar, but public opinion had shifted from praises for His Highness Duke of Qin's compassion for the people to discussions about his personal wealth. Today, a different opinion had emerged among the populace, turning their gratitude to the Duke of Qin's estate into demands. They assumed that since the Duke of Qin's estate had money, they should donate even more. Naturally, Emperor Tianhui was the mastermind behind all of this. He wasn't easy to deal with either. The battle for the hearts of the people had only just begun, so they had to advance step by step. That very night, Long Fei and Han Yunqing made some preparations before setting out on their journey. Long Fei chose to travel incognito without publicizing his whereabouts. Only Han Yunqing accompanied him. Even Zhao Mama was refused entry, but Han Yunqing had no idea how many others were traveling in secret. It wasn't until the second half of the night that Chu Shifeng came to report on the imperial uncle's estate that Han Yunqing realized he was traveling with them. As for Tang Li, he was left at the hidden pavilion to wait for the black-robed assassin to reappear. In the middle of the night, the surroundings were quiet as the carriage slowly made its way out of the southern gates of Tianning's capital city. Atop the city walls, a figure dressed in red robes fluttered in the wind, looking enchanting in the night like a spider lily in full bloom. It was both enchanting and mysterious. Gu had made a trip to the hidden pavilion and narrowly escaped being trapped by the Tang clan's assassination weapons. By the time he arrived, all he could see was the back of the carriage, but not Long Fei or his poison lass. Currently, his usual smile was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were narrowed into slits as they emanated a deathly chill. After a while, he finally spat out, "What a lucky bastard." He was curious as to who had saved Long Fei. His poison lass definitely didn't have such skills. Of course, aside from his curiosity, he was also feeling gloomy. If he'd known this would happen, he would have been more ruthless. Not only did he fail to kill Long Fei this time, he'd only increase Long Fei's vigilance. It'd be harder to kill him next time. Moreover, with Long Fei's personality, he'd definitely do everything in his power to investigate his identity. How troublesome. Gu grumbled. He decided to lay low for a while. He hated messy and dirty places like the disaster regions, so he wouldn't go with them. It had been a long time since Mu Ling had sent him any letters. He didn't know how she was doing with her search for the medicine, so Gu decided to pay a visit to the Mu clan in Medicine City. He raised his wide, demonic red robes before suddenly plummeting from the city gates in a straight line. He was as beautiful as a red kite as he disappeared into the night. Gu hadn't gone far when a white figure appeared out of thin air in his place. It was the white-robed gentleman he hadn't seen in ages. His robes were whiter than snow, and he was elegant and untainted. A white veil covered his face, making him look mysterious and noble. His gaze was serene and calm, and his body emanated a clear aura that seemed capable of dispelling the darkness of the night and illuminating the world. He glanced at the city gates with a faint smile before quickly chasing after the carriage in front of him. There was a type of protection called the person standing in front of you, who would shelter you from the wind and rain, charge and break through enemy lines, and be your best friend. There was a type of protection called the person walking hand in hand with you, who would share life and death, honor and disgrace with you, and be the person you love the most. There was a type of protection called the person standing behind you, who would allow you to stride forward without any worries. That person was someone you'd never know. Nobody knew whether the white-robed gentleman would ever remove his veil in front of Yunxi in this lifetime. Chapter 368. In the middle of the night, the carriage slowly left Tianning's capital city. Han Yunqing had been exhausted from the past few days. She was planning to take a nap, but Long Feiyi ordered them to head southwest as soon as the carriage reached the outskirts of the city. There were 3 major disaster areas in Tianning this time, all of them in the central regions. The capital was in the north, so they should have headed south. Why did Long Feiyi want to head southwest? Han Yunqing was puzzled. Your Highness, could there be an ambush up ahead? Although news of Long Feiyi's injuries had been kept secret, they still had to be on guard against that black-robed man spreading the news. There were plenty of people in Cloud Realm continent who wanted Long Feiyi's life, so they had to be extra careful. I'll take you somewhere. Long Feiyi was leaning lazily against a high pillow, his eyes closed as he took a nap. He didn't seem like a seriously injured man at all, nor did he seem to care about the disaster relief. Where was he taking her at a time like this? Han Yunqing guessed that it had something to do with disaster relief, but she couldn't figure out the specifics no matter how hard she racked her brains. She leaned against the windowsill and stared curiously at the night sky outside. She'd never taken this route before. Han Yunqing was so tired that she fell asleep as she stared and stared. But when she woke up the next morning, the carriage was still moving. Long Feiyi was already awake, reading a few secret missives in his right hand. Han Yunqing scooted to his side and tugged at his sleeve. Your Highness, where are we going? Just tell me. Long Feiyi didn't even lift his eyes as he ignored her. Your Highness, just tell me. Your Highness, just tell me. I can't guess. It looks like we'll have to travel quite a distance. Han Yunqing wouldn't relent. Long Feiyi didn't like to be disturbed when he was reading secret missives, but didn't lose his temper at all. He casually handed the missives over to Han Yunqing to read. The 3 letters all reported the same thing: the imperial uncle's estate was in a hurry to get rid of the grain. In 3 days, the imperial uncle's estate would have to hand over 1 million gold coins to the Ministry of Revenue. Over the past few days, the imperial uncle's estate had been in a hurry to sell off the grain in their possession. However, they had yet to sell a single grain. It wasn't that no one wanted to buy the grain, but that the imperial uncle's price was too high. The imperial uncle had embezzled the grain with the intention of selling it after the price of the grain had risen. However, he was forced to sell it ahead of time. The shrewd and greedy imperial uncle would definitely try to raise the price of the grain as high as possible. Furthermore, the imperial uncle's estate was in dire need of a large sum of money. If they didn't sell for a good price, how could they have enough? The imperial uncle's estate had to hand over 2,400,000 taels in cash to the Ministry of Revenue, and he had already handed over 1,200,000 taels a few days ago. Some of the 1,200,000 taels in cash was the betrothal gift the crown prince had given to Mu Luiyue, some of it came from the imperial uncle's estate's treasury, and some of it came from the loan sharks that the imperial uncle's estate had borrowed. Of course, the imperial uncle's estate's assets weren't limited to 1,200,000 taels. However, the imperial uncle was too shrewd. He had been exchanging the cash for land and collectibles all this time, waiting for the price to rise. As a result, the imperial uncle's estate didn't have much cash left. Any random antique or piece of land would be worth a few 100,000 taels, or even a few million taels. However, these things weren't cash, and they couldn't be casually auctioned or pawned off. If they were to be sold, the imperial uncle's estate would lose face as well. There were quite a few rich people even among the royalists. However, the imperial uncle's estate was the wealthiest among them all. They were the royalists' biggest backer. The imperial uncle simply couldn't bring himself to open his mouth. Thus, the imperial uncle's only option was to borrow money from loan sharks on the black market and pay them a high interest rate in exchange for immediate cash. They had to keep it a secret. Although there was no way to get an exact figure, it was still possible to estimate that the imperial uncle's debt to the loan sharks and the money he had to hand over to the Ministry of Revenue added up to 2 million taels. Under these circumstances, if the imperial uncle's grain couldn't be sold for a high price, it'd be hard for them to break even, much less make a profit. Ordinary people wouldn't know such news. Even the noble circles in the capital who were used to eating imperial rations might not know. Instead, it was the merchants who traveled extensively and haggled over every penny who had sharp ears. They could hear the slightest rustle of grass in the wind. News of everything that happened at Grand Concubine Yi's birthday banquet had long spread. The sharp-eyed merchants smelled a business opportunity and predicted that the imperial uncle's estate would sell off their grain. There was no early riser without profit, and no crafty merchants without evil intentions. At a time like this, no one was willing to be a philanthropist and help the imperial uncle's estate. They would only loot a burning house and lower the price with tacit understanding. The secret missives were very clear. Someone had announced in Tianning's black markets that they were selling 30,000 dan of rice. The imperial uncle's estate had to be the mastermind behind such a large deal in times of famine. Everyone could guess, but they had no proof. Similarly, news of the imperial uncle's embezzlement had spread like wildfire, but no one had any evidence to prove it. It remained a rumor until now. After reading all three missives, Han Yunqing had a rough idea of the situation. She smiled and said, "Your Highness is planning to sell grain to help the people while arresting corrupt officials to rid the people of evil?" But Long Fei Yi only shook his head. "No, your lordship is going to sell grain as well." This, Han Yunqing was surprised. Is Long Fei Yi joking? He's going to sell grain when they're short on grain. Although he had a large stockpile of grain in his Jiangnan estate, he'd already donated a lot of it. Where was he supposed to find grain to sell? Even if he did have grain, selling it would only boost the morale of the other merchants. If such a vicious cycle continued, it would be detrimental to the disaster relief efforts. After all, the merchant's final goal was to sell the grain and get the silver from the imperial court. The imperial uncle still has 3 days. Your lordship wants him to lower the price by tomorrow. Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunqing came to a sudden realization at his words. She couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Your Highness, so you're the craftiest one. Craftiest? This was the first time someone had dared to curse Long Fei Yi in front of him. But he didn't get angry. Instead, he asked with amusement, "You understand?" Compared to the young ladies of this era, Han Yunqing knew far more than the other young ladies of this era. Of course she understood. While the merchants were trying to lower the price of the imperial uncle's food, Long Fei Ye's interference by announcing that they were selling grain would undoubtedly cause the price of the imperial uncle's food to fall even further. In 3 days, the imperial uncle's estate would have to pay the Ministry of Revenue. Even if the imperial uncle didn't want to sell the grain cheaply, he would have no choice but to do so. A wise man would take advantage of the situation, while a capable man would create momentum. Long Fei Ye's actions were creating momentum. Presumably, the situation in the black market's grain market would change very soon. Of course, all of this was secondary. Long Fei Yi had only one goal in mind after all of this, and that was to find evidence of the imperial uncle's corruption. Only when the imperial uncle's estate really started selling grain would he have a chance to find witnesses and evidence. Otherwise, all of this would remain as rumors and conjectures. Long Fei Yi was quite surprised to hear Han Yunqing's explanation. He had to explain a bunch of things to Tang Li before Tang Li could understand, but Han Yunqing had understood everything from just one sentence. Even now, he still felt like he had underestimated this woman. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, but he nodded as he listened. This was the greatest affirmation he could give to Han Yunqing. Once Han Yunqing finished her explanation, she struck while the iron was hot. She whispered, "Your Highness, this concubine has a guess, but I'm not sure if it's correct." "Speak," Long Fei Yi said indifferently. Han Yunqing snickered. She leaned closer and whispered, "Your Highness, this concubine guesses that you're just bluffing. You won't be able to sell a single grain." Long Fei Yi chuckled when he heard this. As he laughed, he lifted Han Yunqing's chin and reminded her with a mischievous expression, "Han Yunqing, being too smart isn't a good thing." However, Han Yunqing wasn't afraid of him. She slowly lowered his hand and said seriously, "Your Highness, I already told you that you're not allowed to use your right hand. It'll affect your wound." On the way back to the Duke of Qin's estate from the hidden pavilion, she had almost quarreled with him. In the end, she had no choice but to compromise and only allowed him to use his left hand. His right hand was absolutely forbidden. Although they were talking about serious matters, she was still constantly paying attention to his movements and his injury. Seeing Han Yunqing's serious little face, Long Fei Yi suddenly felt a sense of closeness. For some strange reason, he replied with a single word, "All right." Naturally, Long Fei Yi was going to take Han Yunqing to the black market. As the name implied, the black market was a secret marketplace. Because it traded in items that the imperial court didn't approve of, or things that cost far more than the market price, as well as illegal methods of money transfer such as usury and money laundering, it was called black. There were two large black markets in Tianning. One was located southwest of the capital and was called the Sky Domain Black Market. The other was located at the three-way battlefield between Tianning, Western Zhou, and Northern Li. It was called the Three-Way Black Market. The Three-Way Black Market was not only the largest in Tianning, but also the largest in Cloud Realm Continent. Many major cases that affected Cloud Realm Continent's economy originated from the Three-Way Black Market. If not for the fact that they were pressed for time, the imperial uncle's estate probably would have chosen the Three-Way Black Market instead of the Sky Domain Black Market. Because the Three-Way Black Market was located on the border, the heavens were high and the emperor was far away. Moreover, the various factions within the black market were complex and complicated, making it difficult to unearth evidence. But this time, they were pressed for time, which gave Long Fei Yi the perfect opportunity. Today at noon, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing arrived at the Sky Domain Black Market. The Sky Domain Black Market was located in a secret underground world. Its entrance was hidden in a barren mountain range. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing were both covered in face masks. Long Fei Yi held tightly onto Han Yunqing's hand as soon as they reached the top of the mountain. They stopped in front of a black stele that was as tall as a man. Although it was broad daylight and the sun was high in the sky, the stele seemed exceptionally cold and gloomy. "This is the entrance," Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. Han Yunqing had heard of this black market before, but never expected it to be so secretive. She was still wondering when Long Fei Yi casually kicked the stele 3 times. Behind the stele, a pitch-black entrance slowly opened up. Soon enough, a hunchbacked old man carrying a lantern walked out. "Kicking the door with your feet, are you tired of living?" the old man scolded as he slowly raised his head.
Chapter 369. The old man slowly raised his head, giving Han Yunqing a fright. He was blind in one eye, his face full of wrinkles and ravines. Add that to his fierce expression, and he looked absolutely ferocious. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but tossed over an ingot of gold. Despite being blind in one eye, the old man's eyes were sharp and his hands were nimble enough to catch it. He greedily bit down on the ingot and confirmed that it was real gold. His attitude immediately changed 180 degrees, and even his voice grew warmer. "Sir, please come in." Han Yunqing glanced at the ingot and felt her heart ache for His Highness Duke of Qin. Just how rich was this guy to always be so generous with his money? He might have many businesses, but they shouldn't be that profitable. Outsiders might not know how rich he was, but she knew he had a limitless gold card and a bracelet worth as much as a country. Could it be that he'd dug up a treasure trove somewhere? The old man led the way as they passed through a cave and began to descend. Soon enough, a bustling underground world appeared before Han Yunqing's eyes. This could be called an underground city. Aside from the fact that it was underground, it was no different from a city above ground. The streets, shops, buildings, and all sorts of other amenities were present. The lights were bright, making it a city that never slept. Unlike the long-established three-way black market, the Sky Domain black market was formed after the founding of Tianing country. As for whether there was anyone controlling it behind the scenes, no one knew. All they knew was that the so-called Sky Domain Association was in charge of this place. The members of the association were all major powers in the black market. The association was very lax in its management of the black market. All it did was collect protection fees from the traders. There were no restrictions on entering or leaving the black market. Anyone could come and go as they pleased. Of course, such laxness only hinted at the strength of the black market. It was so powerful that it didn't fear government officials investigating. Still, black markets had existed since ancient times in Cloud Realm continent. The imperial court would only suppress and ban the smaller ones, but never the larger ones. Because the forces behind these big black markets were really complicated, it was very likely that a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. In the end, it was very likely that the imperial court would end up shooting itself in the foot, unable to clean up the mess. It had to be said that Long Fei Yi was taking a huge risk by coming to the black market to investigate the imperial uncle's corruption. This was because everyone who traded here was under the protection of the Sky Domain Association. Long Fei Yi stood on the opposite side of the Sky Domain Association.
Once the truth came out, Long Fei Yi would become an enemy of the entire Sky Domain black market, perhaps even the entire Cloud Realm continent's black markets. Han Yunqing followed Long Fei Yi around a few streets and saw a lot of things being sold on the spot. She whispered, "Your Highness, this is a bit risky. The imperial uncle's estate is even more despicable than Tianhui. We must get rid of them." Long Fei Yi was resolute. After taking Han Yunqing around a few times, they finally arrived at the grain trading district. Unlike the other districts, this one was very quiet and cheerless. Only a few stores were open, but there wasn't much stock in the stores. Although these stores sold their own grain, most of them were middlemen or informants. They only acted as middlemen and didn't do business. If someone wanted to sell grain, they'd find them, and they'd find a suitable buyer for the seller. Conversely, if someone wanted to buy grain, they'd find them too, and they'd help the buyer find a suitable seller. Some simply acted as middlemen, allowing the buyer and seller to make the transaction themselves. Others acted on behalf of the buyer and seller without ever seeing each other or knowing each other's identities. Of course, different types of transactions would result in different fees for the informants. Secret transactions like this were common on the surface as well, but here in Sky Domain Black Market, the informants were more professional and made more money. Han Yunqing didn't know much about these things. Long Fei Yi led Han Yunqing around as he explained the situation to her in a low voice. Han Yunqing was a smart girl and understood the situation at once. Long Fei Yi was very satisfied with her. The two of them pretended to be buyers and asked around in a few stores. Han Yunqing almost burst out laughing when she heard what they said. Almost everyone mentioned the 100,000 dan of grain, but no one mentioned the imperial uncle's 50,000 dan. Naturally, Long Fei Yi had purposely spread the news of the 100,000 dan of grain. He'd already stirred up the market before he'd even arrived. Originally, everyone was talking about the imperial uncle's 50,000 dan, but now no one was interested. Even the informants were too lazy to pull strings. Shopkeeper, we can't afford 100,000 dan. Do you have 50,000 dan? Han Yunqing asked modestly. Dear customer, grain isn't expensive right now. 100,000 dan isn't much either. Do you really need that little bit of money to come here? The shopkeeper chuckled. The higher the amount of the transaction, the higher the commission they would take. They naturally had to give up on the low to get the high. Then, is 50,000 dan or 100,000 dan lower? Han Yunqing asked again. 100,000 dan, 100,000 dan. Dear customer, you might not know this, but the seller of 100,000 dan is tight on cash and is in a hurry to sell it. Apparently, they're selling it at a low price. If you really want to buy it, this one can help you ask around. Look at how strongly they were recommending 100,000 dan. Long Fei Yi had only released the news that he had 100,000 dan of grain for sale. He hadn't even mentioned the price, but these people were able to fabricate so much information out of thin air. This was the market. When there was profit to be made, the dead could be said to be alive, and the black could be said to be white. 1 spread to 10, and 10 spread to 100. As the rumors spread, everyone believed them. Some prices were raised, while others were lowered. The shopkeeper said he'd help ask around, which meant he wanted money. Naturally, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing refused. Most shopkeepers like this were scammers. For such a large transaction, they could only find another informant, not the person selling the grain. Judging from the current state of the market, it was easy to imagine how much the imperial uncle's 50,000 dan of grain had been pushed down. Long Fei Yi was still very satisfied. He took Han Yunqing into a small grain shop. After a secret code exchange, the shopkeeper personally led them to the back courtyard, where Chu Shifeng and a middle-aged merchant were waiting. Han Yunqing immediately understood that this was Long Fei Yi's lair in Sky Domain Black Market. Master, they're meeting at the Lin clan's grain shop tonight. Only 3 big merchants are going, Yucheng's Lin clan, Yuzhou's Wang clan, and Luo City's Ouyang clan, Chu Shifeng reported. Ever since the auction, he'd been investigating the situation in the black market. If His Highness hadn't been injured and delayed for 3 or 4 days, they might have found the imperial uncle's representative long ago. Just 3. Long Fei Yi was surprised as well. There were originally 5 or 6. Chu Shifeng smiled. But they're all waiting for Master's 100,000 dan. Who's the seller? Long Fei Yi asked. Naturally, the seller was the imperial uncle's estate, but he wouldn't be stupid enough to use his own people. Long Fei Yi was asking about the people who'd come today. At this moment, the middle-aged merchant spoke up. To reply, Your Highness, we still don't know who's coming today. This subordinate used many connections, but was still rejected. This merchant was called Wu Shu, the owner of this grain shop. He was also Long Fei Yi's informant in the black market. He'd visited the Lin clan's grain shop twice to ask for the 50,000 dan of grain, but had been rejected. Although the imperial uncle's estate was short on money, they were still cautious with their business dealings. If the buyer wasn't a regular or reliable customer, they'd refuse to even meet them, much less make a deal. If they couldn't infiltrate their ranks, then it'd be difficult to find any evidence. Of course, Long Fei Yi had already found out the location of tonight's trade. He could simply go and arrest the person himself, but he'd never give up any information. Doing so would be akin to beating the grass and startling the snake. They'd already forced the imperial uncle's estate to get rid of the grain, but if they couldn't find a buyer, then all their efforts would be for naught. Very soon, everyone fell into deep thought. Han Yunqing's eyes darted around before she suddenly grinned. Your Highness, Qinxie has a plan. Speak. Long Fei Yi was looking forward to it. Han Yunqing didn't disappoint. She grinned and said, Your Highness, how about we hold an auction for instant kills? Instant kills? Treasure hunters were familiar with the phrase, but Long Fei Yi and the rest didn't understand. Esteemed Wang Fei, what do you mean? Chu Shifeng asked timidly. Only then did Han Yunqing realize she'd spoken too quickly. She chuckled and said, Let's hold a rush sale and take out 10,000 dan of grain for everyone to buy. The price will be 10,000 dan for 10,000 taels, how's that? Seeing everyone's bewildered expressions, Han Yunqing quickly added, We'll hold one auction tonight, then continue tomorrow and the next 2 days. Chu Shifeng and Wu Shu were stunned by her words. Long Fei Yi couldn't help but laugh out loud. This was his first time praising someone so directly. Han Yunqing, your lordship has to give it to you. 10,000 dan of grain was worth at least 30,000 taels on the black market. Han Yunqing had set the price at 10,000 taels, so no wonder everyone was scrambling to buy. Once the auction was held, it would definitely cause a stir in the black market. The Lin clan of Yu City, the Wang clan of Yuzhou City, and the Ouyang clan of Luo City would definitely know about it. Therefore, they might not go to the Lin clan's grain store tonight. The worst part of Han Yunqing's plan wasn't the price, but the timing. She'd said she'd hold a scramble for 3 days, which meant that she'd be in the mood to buy grain from the imperial uncle's estate during that time. Although 10,000 dan of grain was less than 50,000 dan, everyone would wait to see if there would be more such events after the scramble and whether the black market prices would continue to fall. Everyone who wanted to buy grain could afford to wait for 3 days, but the imperial uncle's estate couldn't. Once the 3 days were over, the imperial uncle's estate would have to pay the Ministry of Revenue. Thus, if they couldn't afford to pay up, they'd be desperate to buy grain. In other words, the imperial uncle's estate should pray Amitabha whenever anyone tried to buy grain during this time. They wouldn't have any leeway to refuse buyers. Esteemed Wang Fei, this one admires you. Admirable. Wu Shu immediately clasped his hands respectfully. He'd lived most of his life and only admired His Highness Duke of Qin. Today, he admired Qin Wang Fei as well. Naturally, he'd heard rumors about Qin Wang Fei being favored by the imperial uncle. He didn't believe it at first, but now he had to. Who wouldn't like such a smart woman? Wu Shu, do you have 30,000 dan of grain? Long Fei Yi asked. Since they were going to scramble for grain, they naturally needed to have it on hand. This subordinate will keep this bit of grain for your highness's sake. Wu Shu smiled. Tonight, the black market was destined to be restless. Chapter 370. Since Uncle Wu had 30,000 dan of grain in his hands, Han Yunqing dared to go all out. After a round of discussion, Uncle Wu immediately released a notice in the name of the grain store that very afternoon. The notice only emphasized the price of the purchase, but didn't mention the method of purchase. Forget about the black market, even in the outside world, 10,000 dan of grain for 10,000 taels was considered a low price. The price alone caused the entire black market to boil over in less than an hour. Everyone was discussing the matter. 10,000 dan of grain was a lot. Uncle Wu only wanted to take out a portion, but Han Yunqing demanded that all 10,000 dan of grain be brought out. Afraid that there wouldn't be enough time, Uncle Wu shot a questioning look at Long Fei Yi, but Long Fei Yi only said, "Do as Wang Fei says." Thus, Uncle Wu sent a group of men to carry the dan of grain out of the storehouse. A few tall, burly men spent the entire afternoon going in and out of the store. 1 dan of grain was carried from 2 ends. One could only imagine how spectacular the sight would be when 10,000 dan of grain were piled up in front of the store. The purchase hadn't even begun yet, but the store was already surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. The closer it got to night, the more people gathered and the livelier the scene became. This time, there were no restrictions on the purchase. In other words, anyone could participate. By the time drew near, the entire street of grain stores was already packed with people. As long as you were in the night market, it was impossible not to know what was going on. In the rear courtyard, Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi were drinking tea and chatting about tonight's purchase. Chu Shifeng rushed in from the outside, but stopped short at the gates to the rear courtyard. From a distance, he saw His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei chatting over tea and suddenly felt like he was dreaming. The scene seemed so surreal and unreal. Under the hazy moonlight and rising tea smoke, His Highness Duke of Qin was as handsome as an immortal while esteemed Wang Fei's face was as delicate as a flower. Esteemed Wang Fei alternated between talking and laughing, while His Highness Duke of Qin listened attentively. Occasionally, he would even ask a few questions. Chu Shifeng had never seen His Highness Duke of Qin so patient in his entire life, much less talk with someone for so long. After all, they had been talking the whole afternoon. Chu Shifeng, is something the matter? Long Fei Yi suddenly asked. He knew as soon as Chu Shifeng stepped into the courtyard, but he didn't want to interrupt Han Yunqing. Chu Shifeng recovered his wits and immediately stepped forward. Your Highness, Yu City's Lin clan has arrived. It's not Master Lin himself, but his personal attendant. Is it time? Long Fei Yi asked indifferently. There's still an hour. Chu Shifeng had been keeping track of the time. Initially, he thought that the Lin family of Yu City, the Wang family of Yuzhou City, and the Ouyang family of Luo City would all come. However, only the Lin family of Yu City showed up. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, could they be? Tonight, the three clans had agreed to meet with the imperial uncle at the Lin clan's grain store. Chu Shifeng had heard that the heads of all three clans had come as well. Although the imperial uncle's estate had only announced that they were selling 50,000 dan of grain, everyone in the know knew that was just a rumor. Once the price was settled, the imperial uncle's estate would have plenty of grain to sell. The imperial uncle's estate was in dire need of money, so how could 50,000 dan of grain be enough? Chu Shifeng was most worried that the three clans wouldn't be lured away by the news and would continue to make deals with the imperial uncle's estate tonight. They won't. Han Yunqing was certain. She wasn't a merchant, but she knew how merchants fought over the smallest details. If this was a legitimate business transaction, perhaps there would be the exchange of favors and face. However, in the black market, everyone was here for the benefits. The fact that the heads of the three clans had personally come to the black market meant that they were planning to buy plenty of grain. A single dan of grain only lacked a few taels of silver, but 100,000 dan or 200,000 dan meant a huge difference. They absolutely had to weigh the market before they finally made a move. Yu City's Lin clan's pageboy had come as well, which meant that they were still paying attention to the matter. Chu Shifeng only knew how to fight in the palace, so he didn't know anything about business wars. Nor did he understand how a woman like esteemed Wang Fei had learned so many heretical tricks. Still, seeing that His Highness hadn't said a word, he knew esteemed Wang Fei couldn't be wrong. As expected, Uncle Wu's attendant soon arrived. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei, the head of the Ouyang clan has shown his face. He's drinking tea with Uncle Wu right outside. Han Yunqing was thrilled and teased, Chu Shifeng, I really should have made a bet with you. Chu Shifeng said resentfully, this subordinate can't afford to bet. Chu Shifeng thought back to the past year. None of the people who'd made bets with esteemed Wang Fei had good endings, so he decided to forget about it. Soon enough, Uncle Wu's attendant recognized the head of the Lin and Yuzhou clans in the crowd. Everything was within Han Yunqing's expectations. Han Yunqing saw that it was about time and rose to her feet. Your Highness, do you want to join in the fun? Long Fei Yi didn't speak, but rose to his feet and scooped Han Yunqing into his arms. This guy's getting more and more domineering. Your Highness, Han Yunqing was about to speak when Long Fei Yi took her to the roof. If you want to watch the show, you have to be on high ground. He sat down with her in his arms as a sea of people gathered below them. His words made sense. If they looked down from the roof, they'd have a panoramic view of the entire scene. Only by being on high ground could they see the real show. Once they were in the middle of it all, it was very likely that they'd become part of the crowd. By now, the auction had officially begun. Uncle Wu was in charge. The tall auction counter was made up of bags of rice and the surrounding area was simply a sea of grains. As soon as Uncle Wu raised his hand, the noisy crowd instantly quieted down. There were 3 circles of people inside and outside. There were people from all walks of life. A few big businessmen stood at the front in a high-profile manner. The Ouyang family was one of them. Many of them were low-key, hiding in the crowd and bringing a lot of servants with them. Although they didn't know how the auction was going to be held, the word auction was enough to make everyone nervous. These 10,000 dan of grains weren't a small bargain, but a big bargain. The crowd was silent, but everyone's heart wasn't calm. They were all curious and looked forward to the auction. Actually, after the news of the auction was announced, the most discussed topic was how to auction. These 10,000 dan of grains were going to be sold at one time, so how could they be auctioned? Uncle Wu was about to open his mouth when someone finally couldn't hold it in and shouted, "Boss, how are we going to auction? Quickly tell us." Once this was said, the restless crowd started to make a ruckus again. Everyone, please calm down. Listen to me." Uncle Wu quickly calmed the crowd down. He wasn't in a hurry to tell them how the auction was going to be held. Instead, he announced another important matter. "Everyone, today is the store's 5th anniversary. In order to thank everyone for their love over the years, this store will take out a total of 30,000 dan of grains. They are rice, wheat and millet. The auction will be held for 3 consecutive days. 10,000 dan will be auctioned at one time and the goods will be delivered on the same day. There will be no other fees." Once Uncle Wu finished speaking, the crowd started to boil again. They thought there would only be one auction. Who knew there would be 2 more in the next 2 days? And it was different grains. This store had always been low-key. Why was it suddenly so generous? In the midst of the discussion, Uncle Wu shouted again, "Everyone, don't worry. This store will do what it says. Although this store is small, it has plenty of grains. 3 days later, if anyone wants to buy or sell in bulk, the price can be negotiated." Most of the people who came to take advantage of the situation didn't pay attention to Uncle Wu's words. But those who wanted to buy and sell in bulk immediately understood. This store had grains, and the price would be discounted. The head of the Ouyang family immediately ordered his servant, Go to the Lin family's grain store. Tell them, old man, that I have something to do tomorrow and we'll talk about it in a few days." The head of the Ouyang family originally planned to watch the show tonight and continue negotiating with the Lin family tomorrow. But now, it seemed that he would have to wait and see the price here. As for the Lin family of Yu City and the Wang family of Yuzhou City, they did the same thing. Only their excuses were different. One said that they were a little short on funds and needed a few days to get the money. The other said that he suddenly felt unwell and needed a few days to discuss the price. Han Yunqing and Long Fei sat on top of the roof, observing the situation from a high vantage point. Han Yunqing smiled, "Your Highness, it seems that everything is going well." Long Fei Yi nodded. Han Yunqing smiled mischievously, "Your Highness, if this matter is settled, will you reward me?" Long Fei Yi was very generous. "Reward?" Han Yunqing quickly asked, "What kind of reward?" Long Fei Yi glanced at her. "We'll talk about it after it's settled. Right now, Uncle Wu was about to announce the method of buying the goods." Everyone waited attentively, afraid that they'd miss something. Even the attendants by Chu Shifeng and Uncle Wu's sides were curious and expectant. They'd been busy all afternoon, but still didn't know the method. Uncle Wu took out an embroidered ball and raised it high in the air. An embroidered ball? What was going on? Do you want to snatch the embroidered ball? Someone shouted out. There was no laughter, only absolute silence. Exactly. Everyone, after 1 hour, whoever has this embroidered ball will get the chance to buy it. There are only 2 conditions, no martial arts, and no killing. Uncle Wu said loudly. Everyone was stunned at his words. Chu Shifeng couldn't help but look up at Han Yunqing. What kind of brain did this woman have? She actually thought of stealing embroidered balls. There were at least 500 people here. Stealing for an hour wasn't just stealing, but rioting. Actually, Han Yunqing was flabbergasted as well. She was the one who'd come up with the method, but she'd never found a suitable one. Thus, His Highness Duke of Qin had come up with this method. His Highness Duke of Qin had said that he wanted to meet the manager of Sky Domain Black Market, so he wanted to use this chance to throw the market into chaos. Uncle Wu tossed the embroidered ball high into the air. In a flash, people swarmed towards it from all sides. You snatch it from me, you kick me, you pull me apart, you punch me, I kick you. Naturally, the big merchants backed away, but the page boys they brought with them weren't idle. All of them threw themselves at the ball, throwing the entire street into chaos as the situation spiraled out of control. Han Yunqing finally understood what Long Fei Yi meant when he said, if you want to watch the show, you have to be on high ground. Chapter 371. It wasn't clear who snatched the ball and ran out with it in his robes. Thus, everyone chased after him. Once again, the chaos spiraled out of control and spread throughout the grain trading district. One of Long Fei's scouts soon returned with a report. Your Highness, the Sky Domain Association's men have surrounded the entire grain trading district. They're all using masked men dressed in black robes who look like martial arts practitioners. They've said that as long as it doesn't affect other businesses, they can do whatever they want here. Long Fei's eyes flashed with admiration before he waved a hand to dismiss the scout. The Sky Domain Association's lax management style was truly admirable. Even Han Yunqing was curious as to whether or not the black market had a true leader, and who he or she was. Long Fei Ye's probing had failed this time. Of course, he'd only done it in passing, but that wasn't their main business. Their main business was the Lin clan's grain store. Han Yunqing had asked around just then, and the owner of the Lin clan's grain store was among the crowd. With the 3 merchants and the owner of the Lin clan's grain store here, there was no chance for the Imperial Uncle's men tonight. Perhaps he was mixed in with the crowd as well. Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi weren't planning to make a move tonight. They were only here to watch the show, but it'd be too obvious if they made a move now. An hour wasn't a long time, but it wasn't short either. The closer it got, the more intense the fighting became. Chu Shifeng almost joined the fray himself. But in the end, he held himself back. His Highness Duke of Qin could still afford 10,000 dan of grain. In the end, a young man around 16 or 17 years old took the ball. Chu Shifeng recognized him at a glance, but didn't say a word in front of the crowd. As soon as he returned to the rear courtyard, he wanted to slap the boy. This was none other than one of His Highness Duke of Qin's guards, Su Donglin. Han Yunqing blocked Chu Shifeng's hand. What are you doing? Chu Shifeng gave a start before he understood. How could His Highness Duke of Qin's guards act on their own without orders? However, he was shocked that Han Yunqing was already able to command the Duke of Qin's secret guards. There's a shortage of food in the disaster area. We can't sell even a single grain. As Han Yunqing spoke, she released Chu Shifeng's hand. You go steal it tomorrow. Chu Shifeng's mouth twitched. Tearing things apart with his bare hands when he couldn't use martial arts was definitely an arduous task. The next night, the situation was much the same as the previous night, except for the addition of Chu Shifeng's anguished wails. The imperial uncle, who was far away in the imperial capital, was extremely anxious when he received the news of the black market. However, he still didn't show himself. He only sent a secret letter to a few people and finally delivered it to the Lin family's grain store. The informant of the Lin family's grain store opened it and saw a sentence written on it. Take advantage of the situation and sell them all. The imperial uncle had been driven to desperate measures. He had taken advantage of this situation to sell off all the grain he had on hand. Although the price was low, the total price wasn't low. At the very least, it was enough for him to pay the Ministry of Revenue and repay the loan sharks. The informants in the Lin family's grain store began to discuss urgently. Sell them cheap. What kind of price are they going to sell them for? They're selling them for 10,000 dan for 10,000 taels. Who knows what price they'll sell them for after tomorrow? Forget about them. We have to get the money by tomorrow night at the latest, or else none of us will have a good day. No matter what, someone has to buy our grain. Are we really going to sell them for 10,000 dan for 10,000 taels? Everyone quieted down at these words. After thinking it over, it seemed that this was the only way to sell off all the grain they had. The head of the family immediately wrote a secret letter to report to his superiors. Although they could guess that the imperial uncle's estate was their top priority, none of their letters had left behind any traces of him. Whether it was the secret letter they received or the secret letter they sent out, they all had to go through the hands of several people. The imperial uncle had already been forced into a corner, but he was still cautious about these details. While the Lin family's grain store was waiting for news, Han Yunqing and the rest prepared to take action. Wu Shu had already retreated behind the scenes, allowing the commotion outside to continue. He respectfully reported, "Your Highness, this subordinate has arranged for 2 trustworthy people." At this time, it was time for them to go to the Lin family to buy grain. Long Fei Yi trusted Wu Shu's work. He was about to nod when Han Yunqing suddenly stood up. "Your Highness, this concubine will go with you." Long Fei Yi frowned unhappily. "What are you going to do?" Long Fei Yi had always been a strategist and didn't like to show his face in public. He also didn't want Han Yunqing to show her face in public. "I'm going to haggle." Han Yunqing replied matter-of-factly. "They know how to do it too," Long Fei Yi said indifferently. He still refused. If it was in the past, Han Yunqing would have just said, "Oh," and left it at that. But she had become much bolder recently. She leaned over and smiled fawningly. "Your Highness, let this concubine go. This concubine guarantees that my identity won't be exposed. I guarantee that I'll be able to bargain for the lowest price and clear out their entire stockpile." Long Fei Yi ignored her and brewed tea with his left hand. Han Yunqing hurriedly helped him brew tea with a fawning expression. "Your Highness, please agree to this concubine's request. If this concubine goes, I'll be able to ask some questions."
Most women knew how to act coquettishly. Wu Shu was already used to His Highness Duke of Qin making exceptions for esteemed Wang Fei. He had thought that esteemed Wang Fei would act coquettishly and was quite looking forward to it. But who would have thought that this concubine would be so fawning? Could it be that she didn't know how to act coquettishly? Whether Han Yunqing knew how to act coquettishly or not, and whether she would act coquettishly in front of Long Fei Yi, only she knew. In any case, she really was trying to curry favor right now and wasn't acting coquettishly. She eagerly poured tea for Long Fei Yi and respectfully offered pastries with both hands. "Your Highness, do you agree?" Long Fei Yi drank the tea and ate the pastries as usual, but he didn't say anything. In the end, when he slowly finished drinking his tea, Han Yunqing had no other choice and wanted to give up. Who would have thought that he would actually stand up and say, "Go tidy up. This prince will go with you." The 2 servants wanted to cry to death. It wasn't easy for them to get a chance to perform, but it was gone just like that. Wu Shu had a look of disbelief on his face. His Highness Duke of Qin looked cold, but he was clearly doting on esteemed Wang Fei in every way. After Han Yunqing tidied up, she put on a cool and elegant heavy makeup. Her long eyebrows reached her temples, and her tender lips were as red as fire. She rarely put on makeup, but with this makeup, she seemed like a completely different person. Even people familiar with her wouldn't be able to recognize her at first glance. It had to be said that a good foundation made her look beautiful no matter what she did. Han Yunqing's makeup made her look gorgeous without being vulgar. Her eyes were open-minded and unruly to begin with, but now she looked even more aloof and refined, noble and inviolable. This Han Yunqing was more beautiful than ever. Long Feiyi stared at her for a long time before turning away without a word. He was still dressed in black robes and a mask, acting as Han Yunqing's attendant. It wasn't clear whether Long Feiyi had restrained his aura, or if Han Yunqing's makeup had strengthened her aura. Long Feiyi stood quietly behind her like a personal bodyguard. The two of them left the rear courtyard and soon ran into Chu Shifeng running past them with an embroidered ball in his hand. Chu Shifeng didn't even recognize them. There was still some distance between Wu Shu's grain store and the Lin clan's grain store. The two of them walked one after the other, avoiding the crowds fighting over the ball as they walked. With a great deity like Long Fei acting as her attendant, Han Yunqing was probably the only person in the world who could walk with a clear conscience and open mind. Ever since the incident with Gu Beiyue, she'd grown much closer to Long Feiyi. Before she knew it, she'd grown less fearful of him and more intimate with him.
If this was the past, she'd be very careful with Long Feiyi walking behind her like this. Her heart would be in a mess. But now, she didn't even realize that everything had happened so naturally. Of course, she hadn't noticed the strange look in Long Feiyi's eyes since they'd left the house. As they walked, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Long Feiyi wasn't stupid enough to bump into her, so he stopped as well. Long Feiyi was about to ask when Han Yunqing suddenly quickened her steps. Long Feiyi could only hurry after her. Abruptly, Han Yunqing stopped again, followed by Long Feiyi. This woman was clearly playing with him. Long Feiyi's face was covered by a black cloth, revealing only a pair of bottomless eyes. It was impossible to see his expression. Han Yunqing quickened her steps again, while Long Feiyi chased after her. As they walked, Han Yunqing's lips quirked up into a crafty smile. Suddenly, she backed up a large step. Long Feiyi was an expert, so he'd know as soon as Han Yunqing made a move. Just then, his movements had been in sync with hers. However, this time, he actually stood in the same spot and did not move. As a result, Han Yunqing solidly bumped into Long Feiyi. Ha! I did it on purpose. Han Yunqing was amused. She openly admitted that she was in a good mood tonight, so she was just joking around. She was about to turn around, but Long Feiyi suddenly wrapped his arms around her waist and didn't let go. His voice was hoarse as he said, "This prince also did it on purpose." Han Yunqing slightly stiffened. Just as she didn't know what to say, Long Feiyi's hot breath landed on her neck. Heavens, he actually leaned over and kissed her neck from behind. Han Yunqing felt like she'd been electrocuted. Her whole body suddenly quivered, and her originally relaxed nerves instantly tensed up. What's wrong with this guy? Such an intimate action came so suddenly. This wasn't like his style at all. His soft kisses, accompanied by his hot breath, spread from Han Yunqing's jade neck to her ears. Han Yunqing didn't dare to move, but her body's reaction was very real. Very soon, she couldn't take it anymore and her entire body fell into Long Feiyi's embrace. "Your Highness." She instinctively called out softly. Long Feiyi didn't reply to her. His light kisses continued without a sound, so gentle that even he himself didn't notice. This woman definitely didn't know how mesmerizing she looked with her makeup. Chapter 372. Who was the one who couldn't control themselves? And who was the one who couldn't control themselves? In the quiet night, the noise of the crowd faded away, leaving only a hazy ambiguity. Under the faint moonlight, one's mind was in a mess and their emotions were in a daze. Soft kisses wandered silently, and the pressure from the tall figure behind her grew stronger. Han Yunqing couldn't help but raise her head, and in her ecstasy, she saw the bright moon in the sky. Long Fei Yi, don't, she just called out unconsciously, but it was precisely this don't that stopped Long Fei Yi's rhythm. In an instant, Long Fei Yi let go of his hand, and even took a step back. Heaven and hell were often just a step away. Han Yunqing instantly sobered up, and her heart pounded wildly. For a moment, she didn't dare to look back. Heavens, what was that guy doing just now? This was the street. Although she wasn't conservative, she wasn't wanton either. If he hadn't stopped just now, and continued, where would he have kissed? Thinking of this, Han Yunqing's neck and ears burned, as if they were on fire. The intoxication in Long Fei Yi's eyes faded, and in its place was a trace of irritation. The self-control that he had always been proud of could actually collapse like this. He really didn't like this side of himself. Towards this woman, he had never allowed himself to indulge in himself. The two of them stood like this, one in front and one behind, in silence. The silence didn't last for too long, and Long Fei Yi opened his mouth cold. Let's go. This guy could actually be so calm after bullying someone. Han Yunqing should have heaved a sigh of relief, but she actually felt a sense of emptiness. She couldn't accept it, but she didn't have the courage to look back at him. When Long Fei Yi said to go, Han Yunqing obediently walked forward. Fortunately, the journey wasn't short, and there was enough time for Han Yunqing to adjust her state of mind. By the time they arrived at the Lin family's grain store, Han Yunqing's redness had mostly disappeared. The two of them looked as if nothing had happened, but there was an ambiguous atmosphere between them that only they could sense. To outsiders, they looked like a pair of master and servant. It had to be said that Long Fei Yi was a very competent attendant. When they arrived at the Lin family's grain store, he didn't stay as close to Han Yunqing as he did. Han Yunqing's first, and he only followed her in. His actions were very polite, and he looked even more like an attendant. The Lin family's grain stores as well as the imperial uncle's eyes in the black market. That was why they had to put up a good act. Who? Tea test? Tea, is anyone here? Han Yunqing shouted. The man looked up lazily. He glanced at her, then immediately went back to sleep. What's going on? Han Yunqing was about to ask when the man suddenly looked up again. He rubbed his eyes, and a lecherous look appeared in his eyes. Han Yunqing immediately sensed the man's evil intentions. She didn't even do anything, but she already felt a cold, sinister intent behind her back. This made Han Yunqing feel even safer. She raised her brows and asked coldly, "Where's your boss?" Han Yunqing didn't know how charming she was with her cold and elegant outfit. Coupled with her cold expression and icy voice, she was simply a stunner. There were some men who especially liked to provoke cold beauties like her. Tisk, tsk, 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 tisk. The man didn't say anything. He pouted as he walked over, looking foppish and frivolous. Han Yunqing originally wanted to use some poison to teach this lecher a lesson, but considering that they had business to attend to, she didn't want to alert the enemy. She could only endure it. The man walked over. He was already in front of Han Yunqing, but he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He was actually forcing his way to her. Han Yunqing took a step back. Unexpectedly, the man took another step forward. His smile was especially vulgar. "Beauty, do you want to buy grain? Call your boss out." Han Yunqing said coldly. She gave in once again. "What's the matter? Just say it. This young master can make the decision." This foppish young master was none other than Master Lin's nephew, third young Master Chen. Master Lin and a few of his companions were discussing the matter of selling grain at a low price in the backyard while waiting for the imperial uncle's secret letter. The grain store was temporarily left in third young Master Chen's care. I want to buy a lot. You can't make the decision. Cut the crap. Hurry up and call Master Lin out. Han Yunqing's patience had its limits. Unexpectedly, third young Master Chen wanted a yard after taking an inch. He actually approached Han Yunqing again. This time, Han Yunqing didn't back down. Instead, she pushed him away with both hands and said coldly, "Get lost." Third young Master Chen didn't expect this. He was pushed so hard that he crashed into the table, toppling all the tea and pastries. He got up, licked his lips, and actually laughed lewdly. So you're not a cold beauty. You're a hot girl. Hee hee, just what this young master wants. After saying this, he immediately ordered, "Men, close the door for this young master." A servant had already rushed to the backyard to find Master Lin. The servant present didn't dare to offend third young Master Chen and immediately went to close the door. Seeing this, Han Yunqing wasn't afraid. After all, she had a powerful backer that was more reliable than a mountain behind her. As soon as the door closed, third young Master Chen pounced over. "Hot girl, hurry up and let this young master have a taste." Seeing him approaching, Han Yunqing reacted quickly. She raised her hand and slapped him hard on the face. Slap. Third young Master Chen was immediately stunned. A burning handprint appeared on his face. The surrounding servants were all dumbfounded. The Lin family's grain store had a very high status in the black market. Master Lin didn't have any children. He only had this nephew, so he doted on him very much. Everyone knew that third young Master Chen used the influence of the grain store to commit crimes. Master Lin could even help him take care of flirting with women in front of everyone outside, let alone in the store. Who would have thought that this girl would actually dare to hit him today? No matter how good third young Master Chen's mood was, it was ruined by this slap. He covered the side of his face and revealed a fierce look. "Men, hold her down. If this young master doesn't whip her to death, my surname isn't Chen." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of a whip suddenly rang out. Before anyone could react, third young Master Chen's face was whipped. In an instant, his skin split open and his flesh was exposed. It was a horrifying sight. Long Fei Yi held the whip in his right hand. With a gentle wave, the whip was pulled back. The whole world knew that he was best at swords, but in fact, his whip skills were far superior to his swordsmanship. This whip didn't need much strength for him at all. At this time, third young Master Chen and the servants present finally noticed the existence of this masked servant in black. After all, there were too many masked men in black in the black market. Long Fei Yi had been silent since he came in. Who would have thought that he was so difficult to deal with? Ah, third young Master Chen screamed in pain. He didn't know what to do. Han Yunqing looked back and was unhappy. She almost said, "Your Highness," but fortunately stopped in time. She pretended to scold, "I said you can't hit him. The doctor said that he couldn't hit him." She wouldn't argue with him if he hit her in daily life, but this kind of hit should be avoided if possible. "Then what about my feet?" Long Fei Yi asked back. Before Han Yunqing could react, Long Fei Yi suddenly kicked third young Master Chen, who was shouting in pain, and sent him flying. Han Yunqing couldn't help but laugh, "That's not a problem." However, Long Fei Yi didn't laugh. It seemed that he was unhappy. Third young Master Chen fell to the ground with a thud. His previous arrogance was all gone. A big man actually choked with sobs, someone, get my uncle here. Quick, get my uncle here." Soon, Master Lin heard the news and came. When he entered and saw this scene, he was furious. "Who are you? How dare you be so presumptuous in my Lin family's grain store? People who buy grain. Han Yunqing coldly answered. Although they had to hide their identity and keep a low profile, it didn't mean that they could be bullied. I'm not selling. Third young Master Chen immediately shouted, Uncle, this woman hit me, and that man also hit me. You must kill them for me. As he spoke, he added unwillingly, I'll hit that man. Someone, get me a whip. I want to whip him to death. However, who knew that the angry Master Lin would suddenly fall silent? One had to know that he was most worried about no one buying grain. His gaze swept past Long Fei Yi, and then he looked at Han Yunqing seriously. He asked carefully, How much do you want? He was very clear about the current situation. People who came to buy grain at this juncture must not be simple. Uncle. Third young Master Chen was dissatisfied. He only cared about eating, drinking, and playing. How would he know the current situation? Master Lin glared at him, and he lowered his head resentfully. He should hurry to see a doctor, but he was unwilling. Miss, how much do you want to buy? Master Lin asked again. I heard that you have 50,000 dan here. Han Yunqing asked back. As soon as these words came out, Master Lin knew that this woman was from the underworld. Everyone knew that there were 50,000 dan of grain for sale, but only very experienced people would be able to find him here. Although Master Lin was anxious to sell the grain, he was still cautious. He didn't answer, but asked back, How much do you want? How much do you have? Han Yunqing asked again. Master Lin had a rough idea of what was going on. His attitude softened a lot, and he smiled, Miss, why don't we talk inside? Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing laughed coldly, Apologize first, otherwise, please open the door. Although I'm anxious to buy grain, I don't care about your shop. Han Yunqing's words sounded like she was targeting third young Master Chen, but she deliberately revealed two things to Master Lin. First, she was anxious to buy grain. Second, she didn't come to the Lin family's grain shop specially. If Han Yunqing directly said that she was anxious to buy grain and didn't care about the Lin family, perhaps a shrewd person like Master Lin wouldn't believe her. However, Han Yunqing used third young Master Chen's matter to say this, so Master Lin basically believed her. Master Lin knew third young Master Chen's nature the best. He didn't need to ask much to know that he wanted to tease her again. After all, Master Lin wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. He looked at third young Master Chen and said seriously, Miss, my nephew has been beaten up by you. Can this be considered an apology? Chapter 373. Merchants in the black market were much more shrewd and cunning than normal merchants. Master Lin knew that Han Yunqing was not an ordinary person when he saw her temperament the moment he entered. He was even more certain that they were not to be trifled with when he saw third young Master Chen's injuries. First of all, the black-clothed guards were not simple to be able to use the whip so accurately in such a small room. Second of all, these two dared to offend the powerful grain store in the black market, so they must be very confident. Master Lin was already a bit afraid of Han Yunqing, so his answer to Han Yunqing was just a test. Han Yunqing was a woman who was very shrewd except for Long Fei Yi. She was sure that Master Lin was testing her. Not enough. Her attitude was cold and arrogant. They beat third young Master Chen, and third young Master Chen apologizing to her were two different things. How could they offset each other? Then what do you want? Master Lin's tone became unfriendly. Nothing. If Master Lin wants to do business with me, then this bastard must apologize to me. If Master Lin doesn't want to do business with me, then forget it. I will not consider your Lin family's grain store for any business in the future. Han Yunqing coldly said. If it was in the past, Master Lin would definitely give the other party the cold shoulder and delay the discussion for at least 2 or 3 days. But it was different this time. He had to turn the grain in the warehouse into cash by tomorrow night at the latest. There was no time to delay. After hesitating for a moment, Master Lin cleverly changed the topic. Miss, how much grain do you want to buy? Han Yunqing cleverly replied, I want to buy a lot, no less than 50,000 dan. If Master Lin has the goods, then maybe you can consider it. I can give you 3 days. Han Yunqing seemed to be giving in, but in fact, she was pushing him even harder. How could Master Lin have time to consider? Long Fei Yi, who was standing silently behind Han Yunqing, smiled. This woman was so young, but she was more cunning than those old foxes. He liked it. Once he heard that it was no less than 50,000 dan, no matter how patient Master Lin was, he would get excited. He hurriedly asked, Miss, why do you need so much grain? Since when do you need to explain so much about the transactions in the black market? Han Yunqing sneered. Her words made her sound more like a gangster. I'm just curious. Have you heard of the rations in the grain store these past 2 days? Master Lin continued to ask. I just came from there, Han Yunqing answered. Seeing that Han Yunqing didn't reject it, Master Lin was secretly delighted. He quickly continued to probe, I heard that the price over there is very low. Although Han Yunqing was acting all high and mighty, she was actually waiting for Master Lin to ask these questions. She sneered, that price isn't low either. Everyone present was stunned for a moment. Even third young Master Chen, who had been staring fiercely at Han Yunqing, widened his eyes. 10,000 taels of silver was not considered low. This woman really dared to say that. A trace of a smile flashed across Long Fei Ye's deep eyes. This woman was indeed to his liking. In his opinion, 10,000 dan for 10,000 taels of silver was really letting the imperial uncle's family off easy by buying grain from him. Then, what is the lowest price in your heart? Master Lin continued to ask. Han Yunqing smiled, that depends on how much grain you have on hand. This woman asked this question. Could it be that she wanted a lot of grain? Master Lin had clearly been probing this woman, but he felt that his appetite was being whetted higher and higher. Master Lin finally became anxious, how much do you want? This time, Han Yunqing didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at third young Master Chen and snorted, it seems that Master Lin isn't interested in this transaction. She turned to leave after speaking. Long Fei Yi silently followed behind. The informants who had been watching from the back door immediately became anxious. Someone rushed over to stop Han Yunqing, but was stopped by Master Lin. He didn't say a word. He looked at Han Yunqing's back with a serious expression, as if he had no intention of making her stay. That informant panicked and said angrily, Boss, if third young Master Chen doesn't apologize, I'll do it myself. That bastard deserves to be taught a lesson. Master Lin still didn't say a word. It wasn't that he didn't want third young Master Chen to apologize. He just wasn't sure if Han Yunqing was really here to buy grain or if someone had sent her to investigate them. It was better to be safe than sorry. Moreover, they were in the limelight right now. He had to be even more cautious. Han Yunqing and Long Fei Ye's pace was neither fast nor slow. They walked step by step towards the door. Neither of them looked back. Their backs were noble and free, making it hard for anyone to take their eyes off them. As Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi got closer to the door, Master Lin and the informants behind him became more and more nervous. Based on Han Yunqing's behavior just now, it would be difficult to redeem this transaction once they walked out the door. Old Lin, let's give in. Old Lin, I think this woman is really here to buy grain. I can tell she's a businessman with one look. Boss, we can't afford to delay any longer. Why don't we make them stay first and discuss the price while reporting to the higher-ups? Let the higher-ups send someone to take a look tomorrow. The informants behind him all tried to persuade him. Master Lin was already a little impatient, and after being persuaded, he was moved. However, he didn't directly ask them to stay. Instead, he deliberately put on airs and said, Miss, other than an apology, everything else is negotiable. Who knew that Han Yunqing didn't even turn her head? She continued walking indifferently and was about to walk out the door. Seeing this, Master Lin finally panicked. "Miss, please wait." Han Yunqing's lips curled into a victorious smile. She stopped happily, but she still didn't turn her head. She wasn't anxious, but Master Lin and the others were. Negotiations were like this. Some lines of defense had to be stubbornly clung to. Once they gave in, everything else was basically set in stone. Once Master Lin gave in, his momentum weakened. Seeing that Han Yunqing didn't turn around, Master Lin became even more anxious. He immediately reprimanded third young Master Chen. "Brat, hurry up and apologize to her." Third young Master Chen saw that the situation wasn't right. He was about to slip away, but after being yelled at, he was so frightened that he didn't dare to move. "Hurry up and go." Master Lin's second order made third young Master Chen tremble. He immediately rolled and crawled over. He couldn't take it lying down, but he was most afraid of Master Lin, who doted on him the most. He had never apologized to anyone since he was born, so he really didn't know how to apologize. He could only resentfully say, "Miss, I'm sorry." Han Yunqing used third young Master Chen to lower Master Lin's guard. She was concerned about the grain and didn't want to cause more trouble. Just as she was about to let it go, the Long Fei Yi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke cold. "Is this considered an apology?" Upon hearing this tone, Han Yunqing knew that this matter wasn't going to be let go so easily. Alright, since His Highness the Duke of Qin, as an attendant, had spoken, Han Yunqing could only put on airs and remain silent. Seeing this, Master Lin thought that Han Yunqing was angry and hurriedly gave third young Master Chen a look. Third young Master Chen let go of his hands that had been covering his face and bowed with both hands. With a sincere attitude, he said, "Miss, it's this one's fault. This one is wrong. This one apologizes to you." Since His Highness the Duke of Qin had spoken, Han Yunqing knew very well that she couldn't make the decision. With her back to third young Master Chen, she remained silent. She originally thought that Long Fei Yi would speak, but who knew that third young Master Chen would only bow and wait behind her. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything either. Han Yunqing snickered inwardly. Even as a servant, this guy was harder to serve than his master. Third young Master Chen maintained his bow and couldn't help but look back at Master Lin for help. He didn't care whether he was willing or not. At this moment, he really regretted provoking this woman. Master Lin also couldn't figure out what Han Yunqing wanted to do, so he kept glaring at third young Master Chen. No matter what Han Yunqing wanted to do, it was all third young Master Chen's fault. Third young Master Chen had to admit it. Third young Master Chen was resentful and could only continue to apologize. "Miss, this one knows his mistake. This one won't dare to do it again. Just say something. Miss, just say something. What do you want this one to do for you to forgive this one?" Han Yunqing was amused when she heard this. She gracefully turned around and said, "Someone come." She also didn't know what Long Fei Yi wanted to do for him to give up, so she just let him be. Long Fei Yi didn't even move, but third young Master Chen was already afraid and timidly retreated. However, Long Fei Yi didn't give him a chance to escape. He turned around and directly kicked third young Master Chen's injured face. Third young Master Chen was sent flying out of the back door with one kick. Han Yunqing only felt that she was very blessed to have someone take revenge for her after being bullied. Long Fei Yi gracefully retracted his long legs. He put his hands behind his back and silently retreated behind Han Yunqing. He looked like a well-trained attendant, but also noble and mysterious. Third young Master Chen fell to the ground with a loud bang. Even his wails were gone. This lecherous man was probably crippled even if he didn't lose his life. Master Lin's heart was bleeding. He couldn't wait to rush over and take a look. However, how could he dare to face such a strong Han Yunqing? What if this woman was unhappy? Wouldn't this deal be ruined? Master Lin could only endure the pain in his heart and pretend to place righteousness before family. Good lesson. Old man has long wanted to teach this arrogant brat a lesson. Han Yunqing only sneered and didn't make any comments. Master Lin couldn't wait to turn around. Miss, let's talk inside. He was here to talk in detail. Han Yunqing was high and mighty and only gave a cold reply. Master Lin hurriedly invited the master and servant pair inside personally. At the same time, he signaled with his eyes for someone to quickly report to the higher-ups. Master Lin brewed some good tea and served some snacks. He was planning to have a long talk with them. The moment Han Yunqing sat down, Master Lin asked, Miss, how much grain do you want? I'll buy as much as you have. Han Yunqing answered straightforwardly. However, Master Lin's face almost darkened. Third young Master Chen was beaten to such a state, and this woman still didn't answer properly. This time, it was as if she didn't answer, okay? She was indirectly asking him how much grain he had stored. Although Master Lin was anxious, he still had to control his temper. He probed again. Miss, I have a lot of grain. I'm just afraid that you. Han Yunqing calmly drank a cup of tea. She was very arrogant. I have a lot of money. I'm just afraid that you don't have any stock. This time, Master Lin laughed. Miss, our grain store only accepts cash. Have you asked around? Chapter 374. Only accept cash. When Master Lin said those words, Han Yunqing almost laughed out loud. She'd been feigning civility for so long just for those words, hadn't she? She'd finally made Master Lin say those words himself. If Han Yunqing had said from the start that she was here to buy grain with cash, even if Master Lin didn't suspect her, his superiors would. She would have been chased away before the news reached the imperial uncle's ears. Now that Master Lin had said those words himself, Han Yunqing was 80% sure that this was a done deal. The money bags were standing right behind her. Han Yunqing generously threw out a sentence. As long as there's grain, silver isn't a problem. Master Lin could tell that Han Yunqing was a rich person, but he didn't expect her to agree so readily. It looks like this young lady really needs grain urgently. Master Lin didn't give up and kept probing. Han Yunqing smiled mysteriously with a hint of cockiness in her voice. Master Lin observed her expression and knew that he had a chance. He immediately flattered, Mrs. Baring is extraordinary and must be a dragon or phoenix among men. As for Mrs. Origins, I'm afraid old man won't be able to guess. Han Yunqing's lips curved into a proud smile. She wasn't modest at all. Master Lin has good eyes. That's because Miss has good bearing. Master Lin laughed out loud. He liked arrogant women the most, especially those with a bit of skill and pride. This kind of woman was amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Master Lin knew how to deal with her. Miss, I still haven't asked for your surname. Master Lin cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. My surname is Helian, Han Yunqing replied without hesitation. Helian? That wasn't a simple surname. It was the national surname of Northernly country. In western Zhou and Tianing, people with the surname Helian were few and far between. In Northernly, however, those with the surname Helian were members of the imperial clan. Master Lin couldn't help but think that such a rich and overbearing person had the surname Helian. After working in the black market for so many years, he'd done quite a bit of business in Northernly. Because of the soil and climate of the Northernly country, wheat could only be grown in a small area in the south. The high-yield rice could not be grown at all. The diet of the Northernly people mainly consisted of meat and milk. There was no market for grains from the south in the Northernly country. However, Northernly country had always been keeping an eye on Tianing's grain production. During droughts or floods in Tianning, many merchants from northernly country would participate in the speculation of grain sales. Even members of the northernly imperial clan would participate in the speculation, inflating grain prices while inciting riots in Tianning's disaster areas. Master Lin carefully looks at Han Yunqing again. He is more and more suspicious that this woman is from the northernly country. As far as he knew, most of the women in northernly liked cold and elegant makeup. While Master Lin was suspicious, Long Feiyi smiled. If it wasn't for the black cloth covering his face, everyone would have been able to see his smile. He suddenly realized why Han Yunqing had suddenly put on heavy makeup today. It turned out that it wasn't just to avoid being recognized by others, but more so because of the surname, Helian. This woman was smart enough to use northernly country as an example. Even he could not help but admire her. If this woman was born as a man, she would definitely be his #1 opponent. Master Lin began to flatter Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing's lips curved into a mocking smile as she allowed him to flatter and curry favor. She didn't refuse any of it. In the end, Master Lin ordered people to prepare good wine and dishes for him to drink with Han Yunqing as they discussed matters. Of course, when it came to important matters, the informants on the side promptly reported it to their superiors. They didn't leave out any details about this woman's origins, wealth, or personality. Miss Helian, in terms of price, may I ask Miss Helian to be lenient, Master Lin said teasingly. He thought that if he raised this woman up high first, then haggled over the price, this woman should be too prideful to lower her price. Who knew that Han Yunqing wouldn't directly discuss the price? She hadn't actually drunk much, but pretended to be drunk and hazy. Master Lin, haggling is fine, but you have to give me a number and let me know how much grain you have on hand. I'll be frank with you, if you have a lot of grain, then the price is negotiable. If it's less, As she spoke, she drank 2 more cups of wine before continuing, there's no harm in telling you, that store's price is very much to my liking, but they don't have any stock. They don't even have a mere 200,000 dan. Tell me, if they don't even have 300,000 dan, why should I pay you in cash? This sentence was confusing. 200,000 at one time, 300,000 at the next. That store was unknown which store she was talking about. Anyone who saw Han Yunqing like this would think that she was drunk. Drunken words were the truth. Although it was confusing, Master Lin immediately heard the key message. He had always wondered why this woman didn't go to Wu Shu's grain store. Now he understood. She wanted too much grain and Wu Shu's grain store didn't have any stock. Actually, in times of grain shortage, 100,000 dan of grain was indeed a lot, especially new grain. If it wasn't for the fact that the imperial uncle's estate couldn't afford any delays, Master Lin would definitely have whetted Han Yunqing's appetite and negotiated the price with her. Because in this black market, there really wasn't another store that could take out 200,000 to 300,000 dan of grain. What a pity, what a pity. They hadn't even negotiated the price yet, but Master Lin was already feeling the pinch for the money he had just received. Seeing that Han Yunqing was almost drunk, Master Lin looked at the black-clothed and masked imperial bodyguard behind her. He was very polite. Sir, your mistress is also drunk. Why don't we do this? Why don't you rest at my humble abode tonight? I'll continue the discussion with her tomorrow. How about that? Master Lin was actually very curious about this black-clothed and masked imperial bodyguard. Although his face couldn't be seen, the invisible aura emanating from his body made people unconsciously wary. It was precisely because of this imperial bodyguard's existence that Master Lin suspected that this Helian lady in front of him was a member of Northern Li's imperial family. Long Feiyi was even more astute than Han Yunqing. With just one sentence from Master Lin, he knew what he was thinking. Okay. He only replied with one word. Master Lin was overjoyed and immediately ordered people to prepare a guest room. He had already tried his best to buy time. Now, it was up to his superiors. Long Fei Yi immediately carried Han Yunqing in his arms. He was nearly 1.9 meters tall and was tall and proud. It was extremely easy for him to carry Han Yunqing in his arms. One was dressed in black and mysterious, while the other was elegant and noble. Coupled with the dreamy Princess Carrie, they disappeared into the distance under the hazy moonlight. Everyone present was dumbfounded. They only felt that this wasn't master and servant, but a match made in heaven. Old Lin, this imperial bodyguard, is a little problematic. Once Long Fei Yi and the others left, someone immediately spoke up. It couldn't be helped. Long Fei Yi's innate aura was just that strong. Even if he had intentionally restrained it, he still couldn't completely hide it. Sir, that woman's surname is Helion. Perhaps that man is also. Someone guessed in a low voice. As soon as this was said, another person immediately said, perhaps he is the real master. Based on his size, he must also be from Northern Li. If Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi knew of their guesses, would they praise this group of people for being smart or stupid? At this moment, Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi were already in the room. As soon as Long Fei Yi entered the room, his gaze swept across every corner of the room. After confirming that it was safe, he carefully placed Han Yunqing on the bed. Your Highness, they poisoned the wine. It's a bewitching poison. I will sleep until noon tomorrow before I wake up. Han Yunqing took the opportunity to whisper. This group of people really didn't know what was good for them. They actually dared to poison her in front of her. Moreover, it was such a low-level poison. She immediately smelled the wine as soon as it was served. She even knew the amount and didn't need to use the detoxification system. The poison would only take effect during sleep. It wouldn't be too late for her to detoxify it later. She couldn't wait to sleep a little longer. She wasn't the one in a hurry. Stupid things. Long Fei Yi whispered. Who knew that Han Yunqing would actually boast, no, they're very smart, but I'm smarter than them. This shameless tsundere. However, she was right. She was indeed smart. What Long Fei liked the most was the confidence and pride in her eyes, brimming with vigor. He was about to get up when he added, don't worry and sleep. With his name, Han Yunqing could sleep peacefully until daybreak even if the outside world was in turmoil and chaos. Because there was a servant leading the way, Long Fei Yi couldn't stay for long. After tucking Han Yunqing in, he got up and left. As soon as he stepped out, the servant said, Sir, your room is next door. This way, please. No need. Long Fei Yi sat down on the steps at the side. His attitude was so cold that the servant felt that the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped. The servant didn't dare to say another word and ran to report to Master Lin. Master Lin naturally didn't dare to have any ill intentions. He stayed up all night waiting for the secret missives from above. One after another, the secret missives were sent to the imperial uncle's residence after 4 or 5 people had passed through them. The more the imperial uncle read, the tighter his frown became. It wasn't until he saw the 2 words, Helion, on the last missive that his furrowed brows relaxed. Although the imperial uncle was the one making the decision, this information was all reported by Master Lin. Even though Master Lin reported Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi's every move objectively and truthfully, no matter how objective he was, he couldn't avoid the influence of his subjective views, especially when it came to writing. These secret missives contained Master Lin's guesses between the lines. Thus, Master Lin's guesses affected the imperial uncle's decision. If it was in the past, the imperial uncle would understand more before making a decision. However, at this critical juncture, he didn't have the opportunity. The secret missives were sent back and forth by pigeons. After going through so many hands, it would take at least half a day to reach them. It was almost daybreak, but his missives wouldn't reach Master Lin's hands until noon. By then, Miss Helion would be awake. By the time Master Lin finished negotiating a price with her and reported back, it would already be nighttime. There was no time to delay. The imperial uncle wasn't very sure, but he felt a bit more comforted when he thought of the Hellion surname. He knew that Northern Li's imperial clan had secretly interfered with Tianning's grain speculation. Originally, he was planning to send Master Lin a secret missive and let him make the decision. However, after some hesitation, he decided to send someone to the black market who could make all the decisions on his behalf. The other party wanted quite a lot of grain, so it was best to use this chance to sell off all the grain he had on hand. Long Feiyi had already gone to the disaster areas. He would definitely start investigating the corrupt officials at the grassroots level. Even if the imperial uncle's investigation reached the top, he wouldn't be able to find a single grain of grain from the imperial uncle's estate. When the imperial uncle opened the door to his study, he saw that the eastern skies were already turning white. He began to ponder. Who should he send? Chapter 375. It was a headache to find the right person to send to the black market. After all, even the head of the black market, Master Lin, had no idea how much grain the imperial uncle's estate had in store. They could guess that their boss was from the imperial uncle's estate, but they had no proof. They only knew the people who sent them the secret letters and silver, but not a single person from the imperial uncle's estate. The person they sent had to know the imperial uncle's stock well and be able to make the final call on the imperial uncle's behalf. Otherwise, another secret letter exchange would most likely be too late. Tonight was the last day of the deadline. They had to get their hands on the silver by the end of the day. Yesterday, the Ministry of Revenue had come to press them again, and the interest from the loan sharks had already rolled in quite a bit. The imperial uncle thought for a long time and finally came up with a good candidate. Back at the black market, Chu Shifeng had snagged a second batch of 10,000 dan of grain from Wushu's grain store last night. In the morning, Wushu's grain store brought out 10,000 dan of grain with great fanfare for a third round. Because this was the last time, no one wanted to miss out on the perfect opportunity. Many more spectators had gathered than 2 days ago. Many of the big merchants who'd never shown their faces in person had shown up as well. The entire black market was in a frenzy, but no one knew that the Lin clan's grain store was holding its biggest sale since the establishment of the black market. With Long Feiyi watching over her, Han Yunqing slept until the sun was high in the sky. There were still 4 hours before the effects of the poison wore off, so she lay lazily on the bed with nothing to do. Instead, she began to wander through the detox system's detox space. She'd been very busy recently with one thing or another. She didn't even have time to rest, much less study the pond of poison water in the detox space. This time, she discovered that the pond was filled with poisonous grasses. Some of the poison had fully formed, while others were still growing. As soon as she saw the new poisons, Han Yunqing couldn't help but think of Zhu Nixie. He was probably suffering from the poison in his shoulder by now. She was certain that Zhu Nixie would come to her for the antidote in the end. As long as he dared to come, she would definitely let his other shoulder have a taste of being poisoned. The only thing she was worried about now was that Zhu Nixie had seen the little thing before, so he could probably guess the little thing's background. If he leaked this matter, she would be in big trouble. These days, she had been secretly paying attention to this matter. Fortunately, Zhu Nixie had not made any moves. Thinking about it, that guy was too busy with the Northernly imperial family's struggle and the 100 poison sex troubles to take care of her and the little thing for the time being. The detoxification space was very large, but the space that could be used was still very small. Han Yunqing's mind couldn't wander to the dark place. The more she forced herself, the more headache she had. In the end, she could only withdraw. She also didn't know how to develop this space. Anyway, she didn't need so much for the time being. Everything was up to fate. After resting for a while, noon arrived. Han Yunqing got up and went out after touching up her makeup. When she opened the door, she saw that it was empty outside. There was no familiar figure. Where was he? While Han Yunqing was puzzling over this, Long Fei descended from the roof. Originally, he was supposed to be guarding the door, but last night he'd sensed a high-level expert approaching the house. Still, he couldn't find any signs of the intruder after searching around for a long time. In the end, he decided to sit on the roof and keep watch, unable to sleep all night. Han Yunqing only felt relieved when she saw Long Fei Yi. She naturally understood him and asked in a low voice, "Are you tired?" "Not tired." His answer was very simple, but behind this simplicity was his gaze that didn't leave last night. He sat on the roof, guarding and watching all night. After all, he was seriously injured. If an expert really made a move and he wasn't careful, she would be in danger. The servants quickly came to serve them. After eating a full meal, Master Lin personally came to invite them. He smiled and said, "Miss Hellion, the people from the granary are here. Let's talk about the quantity and price." The so-called people from the granary were naturally people sent by the imperial uncle. Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi knew what was going on. The two of them exchanged glances and left with Master Lin. Just after they left, a masked man dressed in white appeared out of thin air beside Han Yunqing's bedroom. He was a modest gentleman, gentle as jade. Long Fei Yi's feeling was right. There was indeed an expert nearby. However, he didn't know that this expert followed precisely because he was seriously injured, to protect Han Yunqing. Master Lin brought Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi into a very hidden room. Inside, there was a middle-aged man dressed in blue, wearing a bamboo hat and a light veil covering his face. His entire head was covered. Only a hazy outline could be seen through the white veil. When Han Yunqing and the others entered, he stood up. After a round of introductions, the three of them sat down. Long Fei Yi still stood behind Han Yunqing. The middle-aged man inadvertently glanced at Long Fei Yi a few times. Although this action was behind the veil, it didn't escape Long Fei Yi's sharp eyes. As soon as Long Fei Yi entered, he silently sized up this middle-aged man, from his shoes to the bamboo hat he wore. Finally, his gaze fixed on his hands. When the middle-aged man looked over, he immediately averted his gaze, remaining silent and reserved. "How much grain does Miss Hellion need?" "Our storehouse master is here. He can directly give you the information." Master Lin spoke first. Han Yunqing teased, "What? Master Lin doesn't even know how much grain is in the storehouse." Han Yunqing's question was normal. If she didn't ask, it would instead make people suspicious. The middle-aged man immediately smiled, "Master, you see, even Miss Hellion said so." Master Lin smiled awkwardly, "Hee, Miss Hellion may not know, but this storehouse master of mine is very reliable. With him here, there won't be a single mouse in the granary." The mouse in these words naturally referred to the people who stole the grain. The middle-aged man immediately became modest, "I am indebted to Master Lin's trust. I will naturally be loyal to my duty." "Master, what did you say your surname was?" Han Yunqing suddenly interjected. "My surname is Qian." The middle-aged man said again. Oh. Han Yunqing nodded. She was actually deliberately probing for fun. Just now, the middle-aged man also said, "Money." It looked like his lie was still a draft. Actually, whether these two people complimented each other like this on purpose or unintentionally talking about it, she didn't care. Everyone was sitting here. The matter was already more than half done. Now, the only thing left was the price. As for this middle-aged man's identity, as long as he showed himself, Long Fei Yi would be able to find out his background. "Master Qian, then tell me how much grain you have in your storehouse." Han Yunqing's attitude was arrogant and casual. "We have a lot of grain in our storehouse. No matter how much Miss Hellion wants, we have it all." Master Qian's tone wasn't small. Hee, what if you don't have it?" Han Yunqing asked again. Master Qian glanced at Master Lin. Master Lin hurriedly said, "How much does Miss Hellion want? Please give a price." "I don't know. However much you have, this lady will take it all." Han Yunqing said and added, "Cash." When these straightforward words came out, Master Lin and Master Qian were both shocked. Han Yunqing took advantage of the situation and added, "Of course, if we can't agree on the price, this lady won't take a single grain away." Master Qian hesitated for a moment and said seriously, "Miss Hellion, why don't you just name a price?" Name a price. Han Yunqing wasn't that stupid. She came to bargain, not to quote a price. When she was still a student, she relied on part-time jobs to make a living. Studying medicine was very difficult and very expensive. Many clinical training opportunities had to be fought for with money. Those internships arranged by the school were always limited. What's more, she was partial to detoxification. Therefore, she was especially stingy when it came to buying things and was especially good at bargaining. As the saying goes, buy with mistake and sell with mistake. No matter what she bought, as long as she named a price first, she would definitely be cheated. It's better if Miss Hellion named a price. With such a large quantity, this one will see if the price is suitable. Master Qian said with a smile. You also know that the quantity is large, just name a suitable price. Han Yunqing said very indifferently. In terms of attitude, she won first. Who told the other party to be in a hurry to get rid of it? I heard that Miss Hellion complained yesterday that 10,000 taels was too expensive. Master Qian probed, but didn't clearly state how many tons of 10,000 taels. Not expensive? Han Yunqing also asked vaguely. 12,200 dan is indeed expensive. Master Qian said to the point. Han Yunqing sneered. Yesterday, she complained that 10,000 taels was too expensive for 10,000 dan, not 100 dan. This guy did it on purpose. He actually reduced the price from 10,000 dan to 100 dan all of a sudden, truly ruthless. Did I say that yesterday? Han Yunqing played dumb. Master Lin also played dumb. It seems like you said that. What's the best way to haggle? It's to shamelessly play dumb. Han Yunqing flipped her long hair and turned to look at Long Fei Yi, asking, I drank too much yesterday, did I say that? Reporting to Master, you didn't say that. Long Fei Yi's tone was very professional. Then what did I say? Han Yunqing secretly said in her heart, Your Highness Duke of Qin, please name your price. Reporting to Master, yesterday you said 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan. Long Fei Yi's tone was flat as he replied. When these words came out, Master Lin and Master Qian immediately spat out the tea in their mouths. Both of them were dumbfounded and admitted defeat. 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan, this, he actually said this kind of thing. Not to mention them, even Han Yunqing was shocked. She always thought that she was very ruthless, but she didn't expect that the most ruthless person was Long Fei Yi. Han Yunqing meaningfully said, Oh. And continued, Master Lin, it seems like you misheard. Miss Hellion is joking, right? 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan, how is this possible, hee. Master Lin's smile was uglier than crying. You still think this price is low? Then how much are you talking about? Han Yunqing innocently replied. During haggling, if one had to be the first to name a price, then one had to fiercely push the price down to below the standard price. This way, there would be enough room to take advantage of the situation. 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan, this was already set. Han Yunqing wanted to see how much Master Lin could raise it. Chapter 376. No matter who said it, no matter how they said it. Han Yunqing's price was 10,000 taels for 100,000 dan of grain. This price was 10 times lower than Wushu's grain shop's price. Han Yunqing calmly drank her tea, waiting for Master Lin and Master Qian to haggle. Master Lin had been doing business in the black market for so many years, but he had never seen someone haggle so fiercely without blushing. No matter how fiercely they haggled, there was a bottom line. Once the bottom line was exceeded, there was only one outcome, and that was to be kicked out by the shop owner. Master Lin flattered Han Yunqing for so long, but in exchange for such a heart-wrenching price, he wanted nothing more than to pick up a broom and scold this woman out. However, he didn't dare. Right now it was a buyer's market, not a seller's market. He was the one begging her to buy, not the other way around. Master Lin kept taking deep breaths, silently telling himself to calm down. It was business, after all, so he had to slowly grind to earn money. Compared to Master Lin, Master Qian was much calmer. He smiled and said, "Miss Hellion, let's not take drunk words seriously, okay?" What did he mean by not taking it seriously? He meant that this price didn't count, and that she should open a new one. Han Yunqing curled her lips, then 200,000 dan, 10,000 taels. This time, the calm Master Qian couldn't control himself. He angrily said, "Miss Hellion, this isn't a place for jokes." Who knew that Han Yunqing also wasn't happy? "Cold," she said, "who's joking with you? My price is 100,000 dan, 10,000 taels. It's you guys who talk too much nonsense." As Han Yunqing spoke, she looked towards Master Lin and impatiently said, "Master Lin, I've already named the price. How much can you sell it for? If it works, then it's fine. If it doesn't work, then we'll pull it over. In any case, I'm not in a hurry to buy it." If Master Lin and Master Qian knew Han Yunqing's true identity one day, and then remembered what she said today, they would definitely vomit blood and die. However, at this time, they already had no way out. Under the premise that Han Yunqing offers 100,000 dan and 10,000 taels of silver, Master Lin and Master Qian don't know what to do. If they offer a low price, they will suffer a great loss. If they offer a high price, if this woman says she doesn't want to buy and directly leaves, they will cry to death. Both of them were silent and didn't say anything. Han Yunqing didn't care what they were thinking. She didn't want to wait. "Master Lin, it's so hard to do business with you." As she spoke, she casually tossed the teacup aside and got up to leave. "Miss Hellion, please wait a moment." "Wait a moment." Master Qian hurriedly asked her to stay. "Miss Hellion, because there are old and new grains in the granary, we need time to discuss the price." This Master Qian was quite smart. He used the old grain as an excuse. Before Master Qian could say what they were going to discuss, Han Yunqing cut the matter short with one sentence. She said, "This young lady is naturally here to discuss the price of the new grain. As for the old grain in your storage, forget about it. Just pay according to the price of the new grain. In any case, I'm not a calculative person." Master Qian was so angry that smoke almost came out of his nostrils. This woman was simply too much of a bully. Too much. He'd never seen someone who took advantage of him and still pretended to be well-behaved. She offered such a low price and still spoke as if she was very generous and straightforward. Too shameless. Alright, this was also the first time Long Fei Yi discovered that this woman had such a shameless side. However, he quite liked this kind of shamelessness. Master Lin had been silent for a long time. This time, even Master Qian didn't know how to continue the discussion with Han Yunqing. In the end, he said, "Miss Hellion, this one and Master Lin need to discuss before we can give you the final price. We'll have to trouble you to wait a moment." This was the rhythm of avoiding her. Han Yunqing thought, could it be that even this Master Qian couldn't make the decision? He had to ask for instructions from the higher-ups. "How long?" she asked seriously. "Just the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." Master Qian replied. "All right. I'll wait." Han Yunqing agreed easily. She glanced at Long Fei, but the two of them had a tacit understanding of what was on their minds. Unless the master of the higher-ups was in the Lin family's grain store, the time it took to brew a cup of tea was far from enough for Master Qian to ask for instructions. When they entered last night, Long Fei Ye's hidden guards had followed them in. They'd already searched the Lin family's grain store and were probably already investigating the channels through which the secret letter had been sent. Master Qian hadn't gone to ask for instructions from his master. He'd really gone to discuss the price with Master Lin. In other words, Master Qian's status wasn't low. He could decide the price on behalf of the master behind the scenes. If they started with Master Qian, it wouldn't be difficult to find evidence of the imperial uncle's corruption. While they waited, Han Yunqing deliberately changed the tea she brewed and poured a cup for Long Fei Yi. She said in a low voice, "Your Highness, please." Long Fei Yi accepted the teacup with both hands and replied professionally, "Thank you, Master." Han Yunqing almost laughed out loud. 3 lifetimes of fortune wasn't enough to describe her current feelings. Whether it was in the past or in the future, she was probably the only person in the world who would hear His Highness Duke of Qin call her Master. Once the time it took to brew a cup of tea was up, Master Lin and Master Qian returned. Master Qian had been sent by the imperial uncle himself, so he naturally had full authority to decide the price and quantity of grain on behalf of the imperial uncle. The reason he'd left was to discuss the price and stock with Master Lin. The amount of money that the imperial uncle's estate had to hand over to the Ministry of Revenue, as well as the interest they had borrowed from the black market loan sharks, amounted to a deficit of more than 1,500,000 taels as of tonight. On the other hand, there were more than 3 million dan of grain in storage. Of the 3 million dan, a third was old grain and 2/3 were new grain. Not all of it had been obtained through corruption. Tianing country's harvest this year hadn't been good, so they hadn't been able to hand over much grain. Moreover, the national treasury had a limited amount to spare for disaster relief. Of the 3 million dan, the imperial uncle's estate had used his authority to buy from the rich landlords at a cheap price and hoard them until the price rose. According to Han Yunqing's price of 100,000 dan for 10,000 taels, all of the grain would only be sold for 300,000 taels. How could 300,000 taels be enough for the imperial uncle's estate to hand over to the Ministry of Revenue? After doing some calculations, Master Qian felt more and more clear-headed. He increasingly felt that Miss Hulian's price was ridiculously low. He had no idea how he'd managed to negotiate with Han Yunqing to this extent. After some discussion with Master Lin, he settled on the lowest price in his heart, 100,000 dan for 50,000 taels. 100,000 dan for 50,000 taels. If they sold all of their grain, they'd get 1.5 million taels in cash, just enough to cover the imperial uncle's deficit. This price couldn't be any lower. If it went any lower, there'd be no point in selling any more grain. Of course, Master Qian hoped that they could sell for a bit more and make a profit. The profit here referred to the surplus after the imperial uncle's deficit was filled. It wasn't a true profit. One had to know that such a large amount of grain would have to be sold for at least 3 million taels in order for the imperial uncle's estate to not make a loss. Setting aside the fact that the imperial uncle's estate had spent real money to buy the grain at a cheap price, even the embezzlement would cost a lot. The cost of personnel, transportation, storage, and so on were all considerable expenses. Some people had large businesses and appeared to be very wealthy, but they often couldn't fork out much cash. This was because the larger the business, the greater the intangible expenses. Of course, Master Qian definitely wouldn't ask for silver if the final price was a profit. He would only keep the grain and sell it when the price rose in the future. That way, he could make up for his losses as much as possible. Chapter 377. Miss Helian, 60,000. 60,000 is already the lowest price, Master Qian said helplessly. This time, Han Yunqing was very straightforward. 50,000. Forget it if you don't want to sell. 50,000, Master Lin and Master Qian both felt a sense of helplessness. They really wanted to know what kind of deity this girl was. She was actually so shrewd as to know their lowest price as soon as she opened her mouth. 50,000. They had to sell it even if they didn't want to. Master Qian could only pray that the imperial uncle's estate wouldn't vent their anger on him when they found out the price. Thus, the price of 50,000 taels for 100,000 dan was settled. In the end, Master Qian had to add in all the grain in the storehouse to make up for the imperial uncle's deficit. So your storehouse has more than 2 million dan. Han Yunqing's words were full of sarcasm, but unfortunately, Master Lin and Master Qian didn't catch it. Aside from feeling stifled, the two of them were most concerned about the problem of money. After careful calculation, Miss Hellion would have to pay them 1,530,000 taels in cash. They didn't know if she had such a large sum on her. If it was delayed for a day or two, then it would be over. Although it was a cash transaction, a day or two wouldn't be considered a delay. Just as Master Lin and Master Qian were worried that they would have to go through a lot of trouble with this girl, Han Yunqing smiled and said, Master Lin, one hand for the money, one hand for the goods. This rule is correct, right? Master Lin and Master Qian both let out a huge sigh of relief when they heard this. Master Lin quickly replied, yes, yes. Good. I'll have someone transport the grain. Once they're done, I'll give you the money immediately. Han Yunqing said seriously. Master Lin was frightened. The storehouse wasn't in the black market. The black market only had a small amount of grain stored there. The storehouse was above ground. Who knew how long it would take for them to transport such a large amount of grain to the storehouse? The imperial uncle's estate would have to receive the money by tonight at the latest, and by tomorrow morning at the latest, they would have to hand it over to the Ministry of Revenue. Master Lin hesitated for a moment, then put down his pride and said helplessly, Miss Hellion, you don't know, but this one is in urgent need of money. Could you first? Han Yunqing did it on purpose. She hesitated, but I haven't seen any grain, it's really, Miss Hellion, I can bring you to the warehouse right now. Master Lin said anxiously. Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi were waiting for this sentence. Okay. Han Yunqing readily agreed. Master Lin and Master Qian personally led the way. Before long, Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi were brought to the black market in the realm of Flame Heaven, where they boarded a horse-drawn carriage. Master Lin personally brought over 2 blindfolded black cloths. Miss Hellion, I hope you can understand the rules of the underworld. In the black market, no one cared about the source or destination. Master Lin brought Han Yunqing and the others to the warehouse. According to the rules, he did have the right to blindfold them. Han Yunqing was very generous. Just as she was about to raise her head and let Master Lin cover her eyes, Long Fei Yi took the black cloth from Master Lin's hand and personally covered Han Yunqing's eyes. Master Lin didn't dare to say a word at the sight of Long Fei Yi's deep, cold eyes. After Long Fei Yi covered his own eyes, Master Lin went to sit on one side without a word. Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi really couldn't see a thing with their eyes covered, but Long Fei Yi's guards followed them the entire way. After taking a detour, they finally arrived at their destination. By the time Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi got off the carriage and took off their blindfolds, they discovered that they were in a forest on the outskirts of the capital city. Han Yunqing assumed that the imperial uncle's granary would be far from the capital, but never expected him to be so bold as to store his stolen grain near the capital. It was probably a form of mockery to Emperor Tianhui. Actually, the imperial uncle's estate used to have granaries in many counties and prefectures. But for the sake of secrecy and management, they'd gathered all the grain in one place. This way, they only needed a single group of people to manage the granary, which meant fewer people knew about its secrets. The granary was built like a manor, so anyone who didn't know better would assume it was some rich family's courtyard in the suburbs. The two of you, please come inside. Master Lin was very polite, but he was desperate for money. Han Yunqing and Long Feiyi walked inside and saw that every room was filled to the brim with grain. All of the bags were identical and had no markings on them. In other words, they couldn't find any evidence of where the grain had come from. The two of them walked around the entire manor and did a rough count. There wasn't much difference in the amount of grain. Miss Hellion, you've seen the goods. Should we? Master Lin trailed off. Han Yunqing understood and said coldly, give us half of the money in cash and the other half after the grain has been transported away. As soon as she finished speaking, the money bags behind her took out their money. Han Yunqing didn't see Long Feiyi take out his money, or else she would be smitten again. Long Feiyi elegantly took out a banknote worth more than 700,000 taels from his sleeve and handed it directly to Master Lin. Master Lin looked at Master Qian and didn't know whether to take it or not. Master Qian was also hesitant. This woman's request wasn't excessive. They really should transport all the grain before paying the full amount. However, they were pressed for time. Master Lin. Han Yunqing urged, not giving them any extra time to think. Master Lin couldn't help but complain in his heart. Why didn't this woman come earlier to buy the grain? Even if it was 1 day earlier, it would have been good. He, Han Yunqing had calculated the time accurately, so how could she come earlier? Finally, Master Qian made a decision. He said, Miss Hellion, how about this? I'll immediately find someone to transport the grain out. You just wait here and we'll settle the money today. How about it? Han Yunqing pretended to ponder for a moment, then smiled and agreed, that's fine too. Don't know where Miss Hellion wants to transport the grain. Master Qian asked again. The Qin family temple in the southern suburbs. You can directly go there. There will be people there to receive you. Han Yunqing and the others had come prepared. This location was precisely the only way to go to the disaster area. This batch of grain was definitely going to be sent to the disaster area. After all the negotiations were completed, Master Qian and Master Lin finally felt relieved. Master Qian also had time to seriously look at the banknote Long Feiyi gave him. The banknote naturally couldn't be fake. Master Qian looked at the origin of the banknote. He didn't expect that this banknote really came from the northernly country's bank. Because of this, he felt even more relieved. Master Qian led Han Yunqing and the others to sit in the guest hall while calling out a group of professional porters and caravans to transport the grain. In order to fight for time, Master Qian called out almost the entire caravan of porters. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqing sat in the living room and just happened to be able to see the porters going in and out. Han Yunqing was secretly happy. These porters and caravan drivers were undoubtedly the best witnesses. This transaction was really worth it. Until the middle of the night, they finally transported all the grain to the location designated by Han Yunqing. Long Feiyi gave the second banknote. It was still a banknote from the northernly country's bank and could be directly withdrawn. After confirming that there was no mistake, Master Qian immediately sent his trusted subordinate to send the banknote to the imperial capital. After rushing for 10,000 miles, they finally made it. Master Qian didn't leave with Han Yunqing and the others. He said goodbye at the entrance of the granary. After all, he couldn't be exposed again. After sending Han Yunqing and Long Feiyi back to the black market, Master Lin smiled and said, Miss Hellion, I hope we can cooperate again next time. Definitely. Han Yunqing replied with a grin. She was in a very good mood. Master Lin was planning to earn back all the silver he'd lost from this woman next time. How could he know that there wouldn't be a next time? Just like that, the business deal ended happily. When they returned to the Wu clan's grain store, Han Yunqing couldn't help but laugh out loud. She reached out a hand towards Long Feiyi. Your Highness, give me a reward. They'd agreed that if she did the job well, she'd get a reward. Long Feiyi knew that Han Yunqing could do things well, but he never expected her to do it so well. No one could be a better trap than this woman. If the imperial uncle's estate collapsed one day, it'd definitely be because of this woman. Chu Shifeng, Uncle Wu, and the rest were all present. After learning of the situation, they couldn't help but prostrate themselves in admiration towards Han Yunqing. Of course, right now they were even more curious about what His Highness Duke of Qin would bestow upon esteemed Wang Fei. Long Feiyi stared at Han Yunqing in silence. Your Highness, you can't act shamelessly. Han Yunqing exclaimed, her good mood written all over her face. Finally, Long Feiyi spoke up. Your lordship will give you anything you want. Han Yunqing gave a start before she asked timidly, Your Highness, what are you saying? It wasn't that she didn't hear him clearly, but she couldn't react. Your lordship will give you anything you want, Long Feiyi repeated. His tone was flat, but it was filled with undeniable determination. A word spoken cannot be taken back even with 4 horses. Finally, a smile spread across Han Yunqing's face. What other reward could be more tempting than this? He'd give her anything she wanted. Long Feiyi, do you know that's equivalent to a promise? Your Highness, aren't you afraid that Qinxie will? Han Yunqing trailed off. What? Long Feiyi asked indifferently. Aren't you afraid that Qinxie will take all of you? Han Yunqing was quite serious. Unexpectedly, Long Feiyi lifted her chin domineeringly and said generously, You really want all of it? Han Yunqing felt a little guilty at his question. She was practically all-powerful in the Lin clan's grain store, but in front of Long Feiyi, she was always like a little girl. Han Yunqing didn't dare to answer for a long, long time. Finally, Long Feiyi said, Think carefully before you answer. His all? What did his all include? Including his power, his wealth, his status, his past, his present, his future, and his secrets. Had Han Yunqing ever thought about it seriously? For some reason, Han Yunqing suddenly felt the atmosphere grow heavy. She smiled and said, All right, Qinxie will think it over carefully. Long Feiyi finally released her and said, When the Ministry of Revenue delivers the money tomorrow, we'll set out for the disaster areas. Originally, the Ministry of Revenue was in charge of the money from the charity auction, but Emperor Tianhui had appointed Long Feiyi as the imperial envoy for the disaster areas. Thus, the money was returned to Long Feiyi's hands. In other words, the money that Manager Qian had taken from Long Feiyi today would go back to Long Feiyi. If the imperial uncle knew about this, he'd probably be angry enough to bleed from his 7 orifices. That very day, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqing settled down in the black market. But the next day, the Ministry of Revenue didn't even deliver the money before bad news arrived. Chapter 378. The money from the Ministry of Revenue hadn't even arrived when Han Yunqing and the rest received bad news. Rumors were spreading all over the country that His Highness Duke of Qin had no way to save the famine victims, so he'd purposely delayed his journey to the disaster areas. This was the hottest topic in the 3 disaster areas. Some even began to slander His Highness Duke of Qin for embezzling the silver from the charity bazaar. Instead of buying food with the money, he'd indulged Qin Wangfei in all sorts of extravagant spending. Han Yunqing's mouth twitched at the news. Aren't these rumormongers a little too impatient? There were a total of 7,400,000 taels of silver from the charity bazaar. Of the remaining 5 million taels, Long Feiyi's own money came from the imperial uncle's estate. He still hadn't sent over half of the silver. Now they were accusing them of embezzling the money. That was an insult to His Highness Duke of Qin. Was it worth it to embezzle 1 or 2 million taels of silver? Han Yunqing didn't know if she should feel unlucky or honored. Fine, she gave Long Feiyi an open-minded smile and said, Your Highness, Qinxie is a femme fatale. I've harmed the country and its people. Long Feiyi only glanced at her, disdaining to express his opinion. Han Yunqing's bracelet alone was worth an entire country. Was the 1 or 2 million taels he'd embezzled enough to feed Han Yunqing to eat, drink, and play? Clearly, the people who'd framed him had underestimated his wealth. Although he'd gone to the black markets instead of the disaster areas, he'd sent people to spread false news and fake his whereabouts for Emperor Tianhui to see. Only Emperor Tianhui or the imperial uncle could spread rumors throughout the country in such a short time. Your Highness, isn't that little bit of silver a joke? Who'd believe that? Even Chu Shifeng knew how to calculate the cost. But Wu Shu only said, Your Highness, it'd be great if the common people could tell right from wrong. Rumors are fiercer than tigers. What a vicious move. Uncle Wu's words did not mean to belittle the commoners. It was just that the commoners had limited access to information, and the truth they knew was even more limited. It was human nature to echo the opinions of others. Therefore, no matter how ridiculous the rumors were, they would spread. As they spread, they would become true, and as they spread, they would become history. Therefore, the pen of the literati and the mouths of the commoners were both knives that could kill without leaving a trace. It wasn't a secret that the imperial court hadn't done its best in providing relief, so it was no longer a secret that their grain had been stolen. Under these circumstances, the people of the disaster areas were all dissatisfied with the imperial court. Why would they care about the open and veiled struggles between His Highness Duke of Qin and Emperor Tianhui? In their eyes, His Highness Duke of Qin was the imperial envoy for disaster relief and represented the imperial court. Once the news of the Duke of Qin's corruption continued to spread, there was a high chance that a riot would break out. Hearing Wu Shu's words, Chu Shifeng immediately added, Your Highness, as this subordinate sees it, their next step will be to incite the disaster victims to revolt. Han Yunqing nodded approvingly. The battle for the hearts of the people had just begun. Your Highness, according to this concubine's understanding, of the 3 disaster areas, South Ning County's situation is the most serious and the people there are the most ferocious. Han Yunqing said seriously. You know. Long Feiyi was surprised. Qinxie didn't know which region Your Highness was going to go to first, so I did some research, Han Yunqing replied honestly. As expected, this woman was an excellent assistant. Although he hadn't given her any orders, she still took care of everything. Long Feiyi gave Han Yunqing a long look that made Han Yunqing uneasy. Chu Shifeng, starting tomorrow, conceal all of your lordship's movements. Go to South Ning County in secret and deliver 1.5 million dan of grain there. Split the rest evenly between the other 2 regions and send them all under secret escort. Long Feiyi instructed. Han Yunqing was amused by his words. Long Feiyi was the most treacherous of all. The rumors had already spread like wildfire, but he'd even faked his own movements. Once all of his movements were concealed, even Emperor Tianhui wouldn't be able to find him. Heaven knows what kind of rumors would spread then. Long Feiyi was adding oil and vinegar to his own flames. Without a doubt, he'd draw the attention of the entire nation's citizens onto himself. Under these circumstances, if he personally delivered grain to the disaster areas to clear his name, it'd cause a stir throughout the country. Long Feiyi was an expert at creating momentum, but this time he'd borrowed the momentum of Emperor Tianhui's efforts to create even more momentum for himself. This subordinate understands. This subordinate will do it right away. Chu Shifeng left excitedly. He really couldn't wait to see His Highness Duke of Qin personally deliver grain to the disaster areas. Just the thought of it was enough to make one excited. Still, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqing were completely unperturbed. Long Feiyi personally poured tea for Han Yunqing. Husband and wife didn't speak, but enjoyed the tea in tacit understanding. Wu Shu watched from the sidelines and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. These 2 masters are more two-faced than the other. It's best not to oppose this couple, or else you'll be played to death before you know it. The next day, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing personally went to the southern suburbs to secretly deliver grain to South Ning Prefecture. Meanwhile, the carriage that had disguised itself as them suddenly vanished without a trace. Very soon, Emperor Tianhui and the imperial uncle received the news. Your Majesty, His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei suddenly vanished early this morning. The carriage was abandoned by the side of the road, along with their servants, the scout reported. A complicated look flickered past the imperial uncle's eyes. The Duke of Qin, no matter what tricks he's playing, he's doomed this time. The disaster victims want grain, not their lives. No matter what the Duke of Qin is playing, it's useless. Emperor Tianhui laughed coldly. It wasn't that Emperor Tianhui was being arrogant, but he was certain that Long Fei Yi didn't have enough grain to send to the disaster victims, nor did he have a way to transfer grain. Even Long Fei Ye's Jiangnan estate was running low on grain, while the rest of Tianning's grain reserves had either been used up or bought up by grain merchants long ago. This time, no matter how skilled Long Fei Yi was or how much silver he had, he wouldn't be able to conjure up such a huge amount of grain. Your Majesty, this official is only curious as to why the Duke of Qin would disappear at a time like this. The imperial uncle was cautious to begin with, but after handing over the silver yesterday, he grew even more cautious. He had a feeling that the Duke of Qin wouldn't be so easy to deal with this time. Someone come, spread the news. Emperor Tianhui wasn't worried at all. He was already displeased that the rumors of the Duke of Qin's embezzlement hadn't spread far and wide. This time, he wanted all of Tianning country to boil over the news. For a long time, the two words Duke of Qin were inviolable among the civil and military officials, the imperial family, and the common people. This time, he wanted Long Fei to lose all standing and reputation. He wanted him to know that those who made an enemy of imperial power would never have a good ending. The imperial uncle didn't say much. He'd already sold off all the grain he'd embezzled. Although it was a loss, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing to clear it out at a time like this. If Long Fei Yi had gone missing to investigate the embezzled grain, then he'd be able to escape unscathed. Long Tianma sat on one side without a word. Brother-in-law, it's been a while since you've had a drink with Zhen. Emperor Tianhui had to be in a good mood to address the imperial uncle as such. Besides Long Fei Yi, he was also happy about Chu Qingge. The Western Zhou Emperor and Western Zhou's Chu clan had already set a wedding date for him. Half a year later, Chu Qingge would arrive for a political marriage. He'd also agreed to make her a noble consort, one rank lower than the empress. For one thing, Chu Qingge was the woman he'd taken a fancy to, for another, she was born in Western Zhou's strongest military estate. Her marriage would be a great help to him. Your Majesty's favor is better than deference. This humble official will accept your wishes. The imperial uncle said respectfully. He secretly shot a glance at the silent Long Tianma, but Long Tianma pretended not to notice. As the crown prince, he should curry favor with his imperial father while he was in a good mood. Unfortunately, Long Tianma wasn't in a good mood either. Imperial father, Aken still has some business to take care of, so I won't disturb you any longer, he said mildly. Any news from General Mu's estate lately? Emperor Tianhui asked. Everything's as usual. Aken just went to the training grounds with the young general yesterday, Long Tianmo replied honestly. Mu Qinggu had been in a bad mood for days because of the betrothal gifts and wedding ceremony. He'd only agreed to see him yesterday. Emperor Tianhui didn't ask any questions, but waved a hand to dismiss him. Long Tianma left just like that, leaving a trace of displeasure in the imperial uncle's eyes. It wasn't easy to stop him even if he wanted to. Not only his own son, but even the crown prince had been taught a harsh lesson by him for the charity auction. The crown prince was the heir apparent while he was a subject, but the crown prince still called him uncle in private. He was the crown prince's only support. If it wasn't for him, the crown prince would never have married Mu Luyue or turned over a new leaf. Of course, the imperial uncles supported the crown prince not because of their blood relations, but because the crown prince was also the imperial uncle's guarantee for his future. Otherwise, the imperial uncle's estate would be the first to fall as soon as the heir apparent was replaced. The imperial uncle drank with Emperor Tianhui while thinking about Chu Qingge's marriage alliance. Currently, there were only 2 noble consorts left in the imperial palace. One was noble consort Xue from the imperial uncle's estate, while the other was General Ning's younger sister, noble consort Ning. Once Chu Qingge arrived, the battle for the empress's position would begin. If Chu Qingge became empress and gave birth to an imperial son, the battle for the crown prince might follow. Long Tianma allowed the imperial uncle to ponder all sorts of things while Mu Luyue annoyed him to the core. Long Tianma wasn't in the right state of mind, because Mu Luyue had thoroughly annoyed him. As soon as Long Tianma returned to the eastern palace, Mu Luyue came to greet him. "Your Highness, you've returned. Qinxie has prepared white fungus, lotus seed, and jujube soup. Your Highness, withdraw." Long Tianma waved his hand impatiently, too lazy to listen. Mu Liuyue's happy expression immediately turned to one of grievance. "Your Highness, Qinxie personally boiled it for a long time." Long Tianma didn't bother to reply. If not for the sake of the general's estate, he would have sent this woman to the western mountains to serve his imperial mother long ago. Seeing that Long Tianma was about to leave again, Mu Luyue couldn't help but chase after him. Chapter 379. With Long Tianma's warning, Mu Luyue immediately froze in place. She felt so wrong that she wanted to rush over and quarrel with Long Tianma. What did she have to do to satisfy him? These days, no matter how much she tried to curry favor with him, he never even looked her in the eye. She originally wanted to join forces with Long Tianma to deal with Han Yunqing, but who knew that Long Tianma wouldn't even give her a chance? She originally thought that marrying into the Eastern Palace would be a turning point in her life, but who knew that after being married for less than a month, she would be cast aside like an abandoned wife. On the day of her wedding, Long Tianma disappeared before night fell. It was supposed to be a beautiful wedding night, but she was left alone in an empty room, crying alone. That was fine, but who knew that the Empress Dowager didn't send anyone to retrieve the white handkerchief the next day? Thinking back to when Han Yunqing got married, she and her sisters had made a bet on whether or not Han Yunqing would have a white handkerchief. She had even waited with Princess Changping for Han Yunqing to be humiliated by the Empress Dowager. Who knew that she would end up like this today? The Empress Dowager didn't even investigate her. The Empress Dowager clearly knew that Long Tianma didn't touch her and tacitly agreed to it. For a woman, what could be more humiliating than this? If she had known earlier, she would have listened to her father. She wouldn't have used death to force her father to agree to this marriage. The more Mu Luyue thought about it, the more wronged she felt. Why was it that Han Yunqing, who had no background at all, was able to obtain His Highness Duke of Qin's favor? The only thing she was thankful for now was that she had a powerful maternal family as her backing. Long Tianma wouldn't really do anything to her. However, Long Tianma was still the heir apparent. One day, he would ascend the throne. At that time, even the general's estate wouldn't necessarily be able to contain him. Thinking of this, Mu Luyue felt even more insecure. She thought that her last bargaining chip was to have a child, a boy. In the face of someone she didn't like and didn't like her, she had to find ways to beg for a child. Was this Mu Luyue's retribution? Mu Luyue hated Han Yunqing all the time. Unfortunately, Han Yunqing had long forgotten her. Cough cough, this wasn't because Han Yunqing was magnanimous and didn't hold a grudge, but because she had already taken her revenge. At this time, Han Yunqing and Long Fei Yi were in the same carriage, transporting more than one. 5 million dan of grain to the direction of the South Ning Prefecture, the disaster area. The hidden guard brought over the banknotes that the Ministry of Revenue had sent to the Duke of Qin's manor. Although there were only a few banknotes, each banknote had a large face value. There was a total of over 7 million taels. Long Fei Yi was reading the secret letter from the Yu Pavilion and didn't even look at the banknotes. He took them and casually handed them to Han Yunqing. "Your Highness, Qinxie shouldn't be a femme fatale," Han Yunqing said jokingly. Long Fei Yi was focused on the secret letter and casually said, "This prince can afford to be a femme fatale." Han Yunqing looked at his cold side profile and felt that there was no man more handsome than this guy in the world. Since he had already said so, why should she refuse? She pretended to be serious and said seriously, "Then Qinxie is relieved." Han Yunqing took the banknotes and secretly handed them to the little hidden guard called Su Donglin the next day, secretly giving him some instructions. Although the accompanying hidden guards all took orders from Han Yunqing only interacted with this little hidden guard, Su Donglin. Needless to say, this Su Donglin was very reliable despite his young age. Han Yunqing wondered if it was time for her to raise some personal guards of her own. It would be best if they were hidden guards who knew how to use poison. Of course, this matter would have to be carefully considered after the disaster relief. They traveled all the way to the disaster area. In order to rush for time, they hurried every night and didn't stay in an inn. The carriage was very large and had a warm bed to lie on. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing each lay on one side with a short table in between. During the day, Long Fei Yi was either reading secret letters or reading books. Han Yunqing would occasionally ask him about something, and Long Fei Yi would answer, but he was still focused on the secret letters and books when he answered. Seeing this, Han Yunqing didn't disturb him anymore. When she was bored, she would close her eyes and let her mind wander through the detox system. Fortunately, she'd brought everything with her this time. She'd prepared a set of all the poisons that Bailey Mingxiang had taken and spent her free time thinking of ways to neutralize them. If all the poisons were mixed together, the detox system would only need a minute to create an antidote. Unfortunately, these poisons weren't just mixed together. They were mixed together in Bailey Mingxiang's special body. Han Yunqing took Bailey Mingxiang's special blood and mixed it with her own normal blood, hoping to create something useful for research. She also brought along the poison orchids she'd found in the poison sect's underground palace, but she didn't have time to think about them for now. Ever since she'd left Long Fei Ye's perplexing butterfly illusion to her, Long Fei Yi hadn't asked about it again. However, she was still very concerned about it. However, Bailey Mingxiang's matter was more urgent than the perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunqing spent a lot of energy wandering through the detox system during the day, so she slept especially soundly at night. Often, she wouldn't wake until the sun was high up in the sky. When she woke up, she'd always find a thin blanket covering her. She was already used to it, so her first reaction was to turn to look at Long Fei Yi. She'd always see his serious profile as he read the scrolls. Sometimes, Han Yunqing would wonder if she'd feel uncomfortable if she didn't see that familiar face when she woke up one day. Today, Han Yunqing woke up very late again. She turned back out of habit and asked, "Your Highness, what are you reading?" "A history book," Long Fei Yi replied indifferently. "Let Qinxie have a look if you're done." "Qinxie is quite bored," Han Yunqing said lazily. Long Fei Yi only made a sound in response without raising his head. He really didn't like to be disturbed when he was reading scrolls. To be more precise, he didn't like to be disturbed no matter what he was doing. Han Yunqing didn't ask any more questions. She got off the carriage to wash up and eat. At this time, Long Fei Yi changed the Annals of the Seven Noble Families in his hands to General History of Cloud Realm. Along the way, apart from paying attention to the Yu Pavilion, Long Fei Yi had been reading the Annals of the Seven Noble Families. He looked through historical materials while sending people to investigate. It seemed like he wanted to find the orphans of the 7 noble families. Meanwhile, Tang Li didn't see the black-robed man at the Yu Pavilion. Long Fei Yi was increasingly puzzled by the identity of the black-robed man. For this reason, he specially sent people to investigate the Mu family in Medicine City and also sent people to find Gu. As for why he wanted to investigate the Mu family and Gu, only he knew. Han Yunqing soon returned with news from one of her guards. Your Highness, I heard that Western Zhou's Chu clan has prepared 10,000 Fergana colts for Chu Qingga's dowry. Both Western Zhou and Northern Li were rich in warhorses. Their cavalry was their trump card. Western Zhou's warhorses were Fergana horses. They had thin heads and high necks, long limbs, and light steps. They were known for their speed and endurance. Northern Li's warhorses were Mongol horses. They didn't fear the cold and had strong vitality. Moreover, they weren't startled on the battlefield and were incomparably fierce. In terms of overall battle strength, they were superior to Fergana horses. As for Tianning, they didn't have their own warhorses, so their cavalry wasn't strong. They were restricted by Western Zhou. It had to be said that 10,000 Fergana colts was a generous dowry. Even Long Fei was surprised by the amount. What are Western Zhou's Chu clan planning? He asked. Han Yunqing didn't know much about Western Zhou's Chu clan, but she was clear that Chu Qingga didn't want to marry Emperor Tianhui. While she looked forward to Chu Qingga's marriage alliance, she was also worried about the powerful connections behind the marriage alliance. Your Highness, could it be that Western Zhou's Chu clan and Western Zhou's Imperial clan? Han Yunqing didn't finish, but Long Fei Yi understood. Western Zhou's Chu clan was one of the most powerful clans in Western Zhou. The Western Zhou Emperor would definitely be on guard against them, so it was very possible that they were using Chu Qingga to seek outside help. To put it bluntly, if Chu Qingga could become Tianning's empress, then no one in Western Zhou would be able to touch the Chu clan. Emperor Tianhui will be overjoyed. Han Yunqing said faintly. She even regretted pushing Chu Qingga into Emperor Tianhui's arms. But Long Fei Yi only laughed coldly. Not necessarily. Great General Ning was in charge of Tianning's cavalry. Consort Ning, one of the 4 noble consorts, was his younger sister. If Chu Qingga wanted to fight for the position of empress, Consort Ning would be a formidable opponent. The relationships here were very complicated. After listening to Long Fei Ye's explanation, Han Yunqing felt the same way. Emperor Tianhui really would have a headache. Han Yunqing had no idea how Chu Qingga's marriage alliance would affect the Duke of Qin's estate. In any case, it would happen in half a year's time. It was better to take care of the matters at hand first. She took out a pile of medicine and gauze from her medical pouch and smiled. Your Highness, I've changed your bandages. Long Fei Ye's body had always been strong. With her meticulous care, the wound near his heart had healed very well. He no longer needed her to attend to his daily needs. Although Long Fei Yi had said that she'd be waiting on him in the future, the two of them had tacitly agreed to treat it as a joke. Long Fei Yi took off his robes while Han Yunqing sat by his side. She carefully used a pair of tweezers to remove the medicine from his wound, washed it clean with medicine, and rebandaged it. Is it completely healed? Long Fei Yi asked mildly. Han Yunqing replied offhandedly without sparing him a glance. How long will it take for it to heal completely? Long Fei Yi asked next. But Han Yunqing didn't look at him, much less answer him. Long Fei Yi didn't like to be disturbed when he was reading his scrolls. Han Yunqing didn't like to be disturbed when she was changing his bandages either. She kept her head and eyes lowered in concentration. Was there a second person in the world who could ignore Long Fei Yi like this? After changing his bandages a few times, Long Fei Yi had already gotten used to it. He didn't ask any more questions, but stared at Han Yunqing to size her up. He looked at her delicate brows, her high nose, and her tender red lips as if he was examining a treasure in his heart. Of course, when Han Yunqing was done and looked up, Long Fei avoided her gaze. They traveled like this for more than half a month. During this time, news of the Duke of Qin's embezzlement had spread to northern Li and western Zhou. Almost everyone thought that His Highness had absconded with the money. On this day, the carriages stopped at the northern outskirts of South Ning County. Long Fei and Han Yunqing switched carriages empty-handed and slowly drove into South Ning County. Note to the reader, Little Poison Concubine Group 1 is full. For new students, please add Group 24277806676. Chapter 380. South Ning Prefecture was the largest prefecture in the central region of Tianing Country, and one of the areas hit hardest by the famine. If this was any other time, they'd be able to sense the liveliness and prosperity of South Ning Prefecture from the outskirts. Now, however, the place was filled with a deathly stillness. Han Yunqing and Long Fei saw nothing but desolation on their way. The soil along the way was so dry that it was cracked. Not a single blade of grass grew, much less grain. The villages they passed by were filled with a deathly stillness, as if they were shrouded in the aura of death. They didn't want to stay a moment longer than they wanted to escape. Generally speaking, most of the places affected by the famine were villages. Those who couldn't afford to buy grain were mostly peasants at the bottom of the food chain. They were usually self-sufficient and rarely had the extra money to buy other kinds of food. If the harvest wasn't good, they wouldn't even have enough grain to pay the landlords for rent, much less keep it for themselves. In the past, it was common to see hordes of famine victims roaming the mountains in search of wild herbs to allay their hunger. It was even more common to see them fight over a single stalk of wild herb. But this time, Han Yunqing and Long Fei didn't see many famine victims. Occasionally, they'd see a few hungry old people huddled up in front of their houses. South Ning Prefecture was a large prefecture, so the population in the outskirts far exceeded the population in the cities. From what they knew, there hadn't been any mass migration of famine victims because the other prefectures and counties had strictly controlled the area to prevent riots. They didn't allow refugees to enter as they pleased. So why hadn't they seen any famine victims? Were they all hiding in their houses? With these doubts in mind, Han Yunqing and Long Fei's carriage slowly entered the heart of South Ning Prefecture, South Ning City. A town was a town, where the rich and powerful resided. Even if it looked bleak and desolate, at least order was maintained. Behind the vermilion gates, meat and wine went to waste, while on the roads, bones froze to death. The rich and powerful would never lack for rations. The carriage slowly moved forward. Long Fei was taking a nap with his eyes closed. Han Yunqing looked out of the window and saw that the street was less bustling, but it was still clean and tidy. There were still pedestrians on the road, but there were fewer of them. Although they had changed carriages, Long Fei and Han Yunqing still did not reveal their whereabouts. Many people passed by the carriage, and some even glanced at it. However, they did not know that the people sitting in the carriage were the imperial envoys sent by the court to provide disaster relief. They were also the most talked about figures in the country, His Highness Duke of Qin and Qin Wangfei. Long Fei and Han Yunqing were walking in the direction of the prefectural governor's manor. Who would have thought that as they walked, a carriage would suddenly rush over from the front, causing a commotion on the street. Out of the way. Step aside. Get out of the way. I won't compensate you if you bump into me. Get out of my way. The coachman was a young lad. He waved his whip and shouted arrogantly. The pedestrians on both sides of the street dodged. Many people couldn't dodge in time and fell to the side of the road. Han Yunqing had already poked her head out of the window to watch. She saw that it was a two-horse carriage with 4 wheels coming towards them. The carriage was luxuriously decorated. The curtains were made of pure silk and the 4 corners were decorated with golden tassels. She couldn't see the insignia on the carriage, but from the outside, she could tell that the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. Han Yunqing's carriage slowly moved in the middle of the road without any signs of moving out of the way. The carriage in front of them grew closer and closer, but it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. It had to be known that the other party was traveling at such a fast speed. If they bumped into them head-on, it would definitely cause a large impact. A car accident was unavoidable, and the consequences could be very serious. This was the first time Han Yunqing had encountered this kind of situation. Needless to say, she was still a bit panicked when she saw the carriage fly towards them as if it couldn't stop. However, when she turned her head to look at Long Fei Yi inside the carriage, her anxious heart immediately calmed down. She saw Long Fei Yi leaning lazily in the carriage with his eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. He didn't take the emergency situation outside seriously at all. After following Long Fei Yi for so long, Han Yunqing had gradually learned a skill. That was, if this man didn't take it seriously, she didn't have to worry about it. Thus, she returned to the carriage and continued to laze around. Long Fei Ye's carriage didn't move, and the carriage in front of them didn't stop either. The distance between the two sides was less than 20 meters, and the surroundings were quickly filled with onlookers. The young coachman of the other side naturally noticed this situation. He drove the carriage at a high speed while asking, "Master, there's a carriage blocking the way. Don't move." An arrogant voice came from inside the carriage, "Dare to block this old man's way? Are you looking for death? Charge over for this young master and see if he'll move." "Yes. This little one understands." This coachman couldn't wait for something to happen. He became excited and crazily waved his whip as he sped up. This kind of speed, no matter who it was, they would be scared. He originally thought that the other side's carriage would move aside, but who knew that not only did the other side not move aside, they didn't even put them in their eyes. They still maintained their original speed and drove on at a moderate speed. Gradually, the distance between the two carriages got closer and closer, and the surrounding onlookers trembled with fear. The coachman finally got scared and said anxiously, "Master, they're still not stopping. What should we do?" A young master came out of the carriage. He was dressed in brocade and looked very noble. In such an urgent situation, he wasn't afraid. He glanced at the carriage in front of them and said disdainfully, "Force them to stop." This young master doesn't believe that there's anyone who isn't afraid of death. As he said that, he took the whip and reins from the coachman and drove the carriage himself. He actually sped up and rushed over aggressively. This scene was really thrilling. With this momentum, a collision was inevitable. The surrounding onlookers couldn't take their eyes off of it, afraid that they would miss the scene of the collision. The distance kept shrinking. The young master's expression gradually turned serious and focused, while Long Fei Ye's coachman's expression remained calm. Only 6 meters left. They could all see each other's expressions. 3 meters, they're about to collide. Only 2 meters left. Soon, they're about to collide. If they didn't move aside, it would really be too late. Everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths, waiting to see Long Fei Ye's carriage move aside at the last moment. Who knew that at the most crucial moment, seeing that the carriage was about to collide, Long Fei Ye's carriage still didn't move aside and continued to move forward. Heavens! Both sides' horses were about to collide. Could it be that they were really going to, suddenly? At this critical moment, the young master suddenly grabbed the reins with both hands. No one knew how much strength he used, but he managed to forcefully turn the horse's head around. The two horses raised their front hooves and the entire carriage immediately stopped. It tilted back and formed a 90-degree angle with the ground. One couldn't help but praise this young master's driving skills. It was really amazing. In such an urgent situation, he was actually able to stop and didn't flip the carriage. The horses neighed a few times and quickly landed on the ground. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, rejoicing for both sides of the carriage. Many people even praised the young master's driving skills. But the young master was scared out of his wits. His face was deathly pale, and the hand holding the reins was still trembling. One must know that he had rushed over just to force the other side to stop, to force them to move aside. He originally thought that the other side's carriage would move aside at the last moment, but who knew that they actually didn't move aside? He had done too many such things on the road. It had always been others who were afraid of him, but he had never seen anyone who didn't care about their lives. The carriage was right in front of them. Long Fei Ye's coachman had no choice but to stop. The two carriages were really facing each other. Although the young master was scared out of his wits, he quickly became tyrannical. He turned his horse around and faced Long Fei Ye's carriage. He waved his whip and pointed at the coachman, scolding, "Did you not bring your eyes out? How dare you not move aside when you see this young master's carriage?" He didn't care whether the people in the carriage wanted their lives or not. In any case, within South Ning County's sphere of influence, anyone who met him would have to move aside. The consequences of not moving aside were very serious. The surrounding onlookers were frightened and worried for Long Fei Ye's carriage. One must know that this young master was none other than the treasured son of South Ning County's governor, Nangua Jun. This guy relied on his father's position as the governor of the county. Since young, he had been tyrannical in South Ning County and was privately called the Crown Prince of South Ning County. There was a saying in South Ning County that one would rather offend the governor than offend the governor's son. In the face of Nangua Jun's arrogance, the coachman was calm and collected. "Young master, this one doesn't know you. Please move aside." As expected of one of Long Fei Ye's men. Even if he was just a coachman, his words and actions were calm and very well-mannered. "Ha ha ha, there's actually someone who doesn't know this young master. This must be your first time in South Ning." Nangua Jun laughed loudly. "Young master, who you are has nothing to do with this one. My master has important matters to attend to. Please move aside." This was the second time the coachman asked him to move aside. Nangua Jun's face was filled with disbelief. He looked at the surrounding crowd and laughed loudly. "Did you hear that?" He actually asked this young master to move aside. Everyone laughed foolishly. When Nangua Jun had enough of laughing, he raised his chin and coldly looked over. He sternly warned, "Who is in the carriage? Get out immediately or this young master won't be polite." Who knew that the coachman still didn't take it seriously and turned to report, "Master, he won't move aside." Under everyone's watchful eyes, Nangua Jun was completely ignored. He was about to flip out when a low and cold voice suddenly came from the carriage and said two words, "Push aside." Push aside? What did that mean? Nangua Jun and the others didn't understand. The coachman suddenly raised his whip and whipped the white horse. This white horse seemed to have a mind of its own as it stamped its feet and prepared to charge. After the coachman whipped the white horse a second time, it exploded with astonishing strength and charged forward without caring about the things in front of it. The man didn't react, but Nangua Jun's horse did. The two horses hurriedly fled to the left and right. Long Fei Ye's white horse charged forward and crashed into the shaft of the carriage with a bang. It actually broke the shaft of the carriage. With the shaft broken, the two horses fled in panic. Nangua Jun and the coachman fell to the ground, dumbfounded. Only then did they understand what "push aside" meant. The surrounding crowd was shocked. Nangua Jun was so arrogant and overbearing, so aggressive, but he didn't dare to actually crash into the carriage. He even braked at the last moment. Who knew that the other party would actually crash into them? Even if they didn't care about the horses or the carriage, they still had to care about their lives. Everyone was still stunned when that cold voice came from the carriage for the second time. "Old Lin, why aren't you leaving? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.